The Sheikh's Pregnant Fling. Azhar Sheikhs, Book 2. Written by Leslie North. Narrated by Roberto Scarlato. Chapter 1. Cassandra drifted out of the chapel in the swell of wedding guests, like guppies heading downstream. She smiled lazily, the chords of the recessional still making pleasant trails through her body. Weddings were the best, the summation of her life's work. The guests streamed toward the outdoor reception area, which jutted up against a rocky shoreline overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The water was calm, and the sun set in the west, brilliant and golden, casting a romantic hue over the affair. Not like the affair needed any help. The entire stone-laid patio boasted bouquets of lilies and strings of twinkle lights hung between the rustic posts supporting the trellised overhang. From any angle, it was the stuff of wedding dreamlands. And the guest list was especially well-groomed, with a few celebrities in the mix. Jay Leno, for some unfathomable reason, was linked to the bride. Bona fide hotties dotted the scene, the type of Hollywood gorgeous that made casting directors drool. One in particular made Cassandra's gaze stick like glue whenever their paths crossed. A sexy, dark-skinned man, clean-shaven. Something about him screamed professional. She shivered whenever she saw him. A stage faced a large open area on the patio, and beautifully laid tables fanned out around it, making a semicircle. Guests headed toward the tables, seeking their spot, and Cassandra let her gaze trip over everything. Wedding days were special to the bride and groom, but Cassandra took a special pride at each affair. She'd single-handedly brought this couple together. Almost every couple she matched invited her to the wedding. This was couple number 30, by her count. But that could have been an underestimation. She'd become quite adept at navigating these weddings as the outsider, friend to almost no one, simply looking into the life of her clients. But she liked it that way. Made it seem more like a fairy tale, as if she were lazily thumbing through pages at home, witnessing the fascinating arcs and gleams of someone else's life. A couple known in passing. Cassandra drifted through the crowd, looking for the curlicued number 9 that denoted her table. Across the patio, the dark-skinned hunk caught her eye. She swallowed hard. This was what? The 5th time they'd locked eyes? Like a couple of fated lovers? It couldn't be an accident anymore. Maybe he liked what he saw as much as she did. She spotted table 9 and smiled, picking up the dainty white placard with her name printed on it. No one else had arrived yet. Her table mates were still mysteries. But if past weddings were any indication, she was usually flanked by all the other singles. A man in a suit and a fedora stepped up to the microphone on the stage. "Excuse me, everyone. If you could please make your way to your tables, we'll be serving dinner shortly." Cassandra plunked herself down in her seat, being prompt and following the rules, something of her specialty. She eyed the other guests heading for tables, trying to pick out the other single people. Sometimes it was so obvious they might as well have arrows over their heads. Darting eyes, hands buried in pockets, keeping to the periphery. She could spot all the signs a mile away. Across the patio, the dark hunk caught her eye again, and then he headed her way. She straightened in her seat, paralyzed by the attention, by the blatant eye contact that meant, "Yes, I see you. This is intentional." He's coming over now. Dear God, he's only feet away. The man smiled, gesturing to the chair next to her. "May I?" Her mouth hung open, and she forced herself to look away from his captivating umber gaze. Was this real life, or some amazing GQ ad? It looks like somebody named Patrick is assigned here." She swallowed hard, gesturing toward the placard. "Patrick Heron." "Unless that's you?" His smile widened, and he strolled the perimeter of the table, studying each placard. He snatched up a name card from across the table and switched it out with Patrick's. He gestured to the chair again. Now it has my name. Her gaze fell to the placard. Nasir Azhar. The chair legs scraping against the stone paver reverberated through her body, making her breath catch in her throat. He was one of the singles. I hope Patrick doesn't mind, he said, his voice silky smooth. Cologne wafted toward her, and her thighs clenched. At her side, power and confidence rolled off him in waves. She could sense he was important. Somewhere. Doing something. Maybe she'd be lucky enough to find out the details. If she could find her damn voice again. Cassandra tried to laugh. It sounded like a strangled yelp. Nothing came out right while so near to this man. This god. I won't tell if you don't. He relaxed into his seat, making a display of peering at her placard. So you're Cassandra? She glanced down at the card, as though seeing it for the first time. Holy hell, her name sounded good on his lips. A twinge of an accent made itself known. She was desperate to hear it again. No, actually, I'm just stealing her seat. She grinned, then cursed herself for the lame joke. Maybe she could recover. Seeing how long I can pose as Cassandra before she comes over here and demands that I return her identity. Nasir nodded, jaw flexing. Please tell me you're joking. I won't reveal my secrets. Nasir's dark gaze swept over her, the hint of a smile emerging. So she'd amused Mr. Dry Guy. His teeth shone perfectly straight and white. Everything about him screamed wealth and the cool air of luxury. She was sure his home was full of bespoke tailoring, glittering silverware, probably oysters for snacks. She wanted to melt all over him, completely encase him. Don't act shocked, she went on, determined to make him laugh. I saw you almost steal Patrick's identity just a few moments ago. Nasir chuckled. Success. Fine, allow me to properly introduce myself. He offered his hand, nails so perfect he'd probably gone for a manicure. I am Nasir. It's a pleasure to meet you. Cassandra faced him, slipping her hand into his. The heat of him seared through her, the touch of his skin begging her to extend the handshake. Likewise, Nasir. I'm Cassandra. Which side brings you to this fine affair, bride or groom? She grinned, but her belly flopped. Admitting what she did, the relationship that brought her here, seemed like a bad move. Most of the time, it pushed conversations into slightly awkward territory. I know both of them from a past work project. What about you? I am a good friend of the groom. His gaze moved to the other side of the table, as a few others sat down. He nodded a greeting to them, but turned his attention back to Cassandra. We met in graduate school. She sized him up, wondering if she could surmise his collegiate affiliation in advance. It might not even be domestic. There was no way to guess. Which school? Maybe I know it. Maybe you do. Harvard Business? She bit back a grin, nodding. Yep, I've heard of that once or twice before. A pleasant silence settled between them as the rest of their assigned table mates filed in. Half women and half men at the table. So apparently, the bride and groom hoped there'd be a little matchmaking at the singles table. Cassandra smiled at the thought. Though matchmaking was her profession, she didn't intend to find her match anytime soon. Life was too busy for a partner, so why bother even trying? Eye candy was better. Eye candy like Nasir. Cassandra smiled at the other people at the table, introducing herself to the man at her left. She wanted to play it cool around Nasir, make him think she wouldn't climb into his lap immediately if only he suggested it, even though she was dying to look into those dreamy dark eyes and learn all about him. Something about his dry, serious demeanor was like a tractor beam. She was desperate to see that smile on his face again. "All right, everyone," the man at the microphone returned, smiling brightly at the filled tables. A band stood behind him with instruments. "It's time to welcome the wedding party." Cheers erupted, and the announcer introduced the bridal party one by one. Beautiful women and handsome men strutted across the dance floor, waving bouquets, preening for the cameras, each one the epitome of LA beauty. Cassandra sighed as she watched them, both enchanted and confused by the wedding tradition. It was so fun and so elegant, but so much money for just one day. Her mind always circled back to the perennial question, what would you do for your wedding? Until she reminded herself she'd never be getting married. Not after her own parents had proven that even the most picture-perfect appearance didn't mean shit about the happily ever after. "Their bridal party looks like they stepped off a movie set," Nasir said, his voice soft near her ear. She turned, heart racing, a grin creeping across her face. "I was just thinking the same thing." Cassandra paused, measuring her words. "Do you think this is all just for show? Like we're on a set?" Nasir laughed softly, like he couldn't help it, even though he tried. "You can't be serious." The wedding announcer interrupted them. "And now, it is my honor to present to you all, Mr. and Mrs. Kavanaugh!" Applause swelled, and all the guests leapt to their feet. Cassandra followed suit, clapping wildly, glancing over her shoulder at Nasir. His gaze waited for hers, sending a shiver up and down her spine. This reception would end far better than she'd hoped. Usually, she stuck around until they started charging for drinks, or at least until cake. But tonight, if Nasir was around, she'd stay until they forced her out. The bride and groom waved to the guests like celebrities walking down the red carpet. The bride glittered in an off-shoulder white gown that clung to her tiny, toned frame. The groom loomed tall and powerful above her, beaming ear to ear. Behind them, the band played a rocking rendition of "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." Once the couple stopped waving and headed for their own table with the bridal party, the band switched to something almost somber-sounding. Cassandra lifted a brow, seeking Nasir's gaze to see if he noticed the odd twist. His smiling eyes waited for hers. "The music." She nodded. "It sounds..." She squinted at the band as she listened. "Like a funeral dirge." He broke into laughter, which made her belly flutter. She liked making him laugh. Seemed like maybe he needed it in his life. Excitement thrilled through her, but she squashed it. She couldn't get too giddy about this guy. He'd be a pleasant companion for the night and nothing more. "You'd think they'd have a string quartet," Cassandra said, gesturing around them. "I mean, look at this place. It's elegant, completely dreamy. Instead, they hired a rock band from the 80s. "Playing music that makes you want to get a divorce immediately," Nasir added. She giggled into her hand. Baby's first joke. Nasir fished around in his pocket for something, revealing a sleek black phone. He furrowed his brow as he looked at the illuminated screen. "Excuse me a moment," he said apologetically, then pressed the phone to his ear. She tried not to listen to his call, but it was impossible not to overhear the tight syllables of a foreign language. She clenched her thighs. Every 5 minutes, this guy doubled his hotness. He hung up the phone and pocketed it, turning to her. His face betrayed bad news. "Cassandra, I'm afraid I have to leave." Her mouth parted, but she stilled her tongue before she could protest. They'd met 20 minutes ago. What right did she have to protest? But there's a connection here. "Oh, so suddenly?" "There's been a work emergency. I must go take care of some things." He rummaged inside his suit coat, producing a business card. She took it hesitantly, catching another whiff of his cologne. "Here's my card. I'd like for you to call me, or text, whatever you prefer. I've enjoyed talking to you." He paused, tapping a finger on the tablecloth, his expression earnest. "I'd like to get to know you better." I would too." She couldn't mean the words more. She'd throw her arms around his neck if it were socially acceptable. "Great." He waited a moment before pushing out of his chair, like maybe he'd wanted to touch her, hug her, give her a kiss. That was wishful thinking. "I hope to hear from you." She waved at him as he pushed his chair in and hurried away, heading for the bride and groom's table. She couldn't avoid checking out his ass, round and firm-looking under that sleek black suit, nor could she look away as he said his goodbyes to the new couple. She absorbed the sad look on the groom's face, the friendly hug he gave them both, and certainly didn't miss the final smile Nasir tossed her way before he left the patio area and disappeared from the reception. Cassandra slumped into her chair, feeling spent, like a deflated balloon. 20 minutes with the guy and she was halfway in love. What sort of madness was that? She ran a fingertip over the face of the business card, drawing circles around his name. Now she just had to decide when she'd send the first text. Chapter 2. Nasir pushed into the lobby of the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Los Angeles, taking a deep breath of the pleasantly sterile air. Los Angeles was a madhouse that evening, but it didn't even touch the raucous interior of his mind. Work had been hell, even for a Monday, but during the cab ride on the way to the hotel, Cassandra had texted. Finally. He wouldn't look at it until dinner was over. He couldn't let it cloud his time with his family. If he looked at it now, he'd be liable to skip the family dinner entirely and meet her wherever she stood. In the elevator, his fingers itched to pull out his phone all the way to the 24th floor. In his mind's eyes, all he could see was her, the perfectly heart-shaped face, the glossy blonde hair that smelled like flowers, her plump pink lips that nearly pushed him over the edge. He could imagine those lips doing a lot of things. Her short, toned frame looked like it wouldn't have much of a problem doing a lot of other things, too. He strode toward the restaurant, his shoes tapping quietly on the tiled floor. Best not to think about Cassandra too much before the family dinner. As soon as he crossed the threshold into the moodily lit restaurant, he spotted his mother and youngest brother tucked into a corner overlooking the cityscape. He waved as he approached, weaving through heavily padded chairs to reach the table. He pressed a kiss to both his mother's and brother's cheeks before he settled in, smoothing the napkin over his lap. "You're early," he commented, creasing a brow. "Usually I'm the early one." "Yes, well, we had some matters to take care of downtown, so I thought we'd come and enjoy the view once we finished." His mother Sophia's perfectly painted lips turned up at the corners. Her gaze glittered like a dark gemstone. "I see you infrequently. These dinners are practically the only way I know I have an eldest son." Nasir shook his head, sipping at his water glass in lieu of responding. His youngest brother, Basiri, laughed. "Mother, it's only been a couple of months. Please." Sophia seared him with a look. "Are you seeing somebody, Nasir?" The question fell like a boulder over a precipice. His mother would never let up on the quest for his wife. But at least she spared him some of the meddling she'd reserved for Asim. Being her favorite had its perks, and this was one. "Of course not, Mother," Nasir tutted. "I don't have any time. You know this." "He's married to his desk," Basiri quipped. Sophia glowered at her youngest, then turned her piercing gaze back to him. "That's not very reassuring. I don't want you to sacrifice your life just to uphold the legacy of your father, of this family." "I'm not sacrificing my life. Quite the contrary." He smiled politely to the waiter, who arrived to take his drink order. He asked for a glass of red wine. "I'm quite enjoying my life and would rather immerse myself in work." "Perhaps a matchmaker is in order." Nasir sighed, turning the glass of water between thumb and forefinger. It's not necessary. Matchmaker like what? Pre-Tinder? Basiri's brow shot up. Don't tell me you use that dangerous stuff, Sophia warned, narrowing her eyes. Of course not, Basiri said, hefting with a laugh. Nasir fought to smile until his mother shifted her attention back to him. It would be good for you, Sophia said, reaching across the table to pat his hand. You're so busy. Let the professionals do the work. You just show up and meet a lovely person and then decide if you like her. Wouldn't that be nice? Nasir clenched his jaw as he thought it over. It sounded like a nightmare, but he couldn't tell his mother that. She'd never understand. He was meant for work. Even if he sort of, somewhere, deep down might be open to a relationship, the whole premise was flawed. Being with a woman required attention and dedication, which he couldn't spare from the business. It could never even out. So why are you so excited to hear from Cassandra? His fingers twitched as he considered swiping open his phone to read her message, but he stilled himself. Mother, I don't think I have time to do that right now. Oh, come now. What do you spend every day doing? Working. You won't survive forever like that. You must learn to get fresh air and meet people and be with women. Her forceful words rang between his ears. Was she secretly calling him gay? Maybe his own reticence had pushed her to this assumption. I just went to a wedding this past weekend, I'll have you know. I got plenty of fresh air. The waiter arrived with his wine, which he received gratefully. He took a sip as his mother responded. Hiring a matchmaker won't hurt. I'll pay for it. Just say yes. Basiri's eyes widened at his mother's side, a look of empathy. Their mother was incorrigible, and each brother suffered in their own way under her whims. Fine, he said, taking another sip of wine. Sophia grinned like the Cheshire Cat. I knew you'd see reason. You've been planning this for a while, haven't you? Sophia's eyes glittered with mischief. Why would you think that? I'm heading to the powder room, boys. I'll be back. She stood and sashayed toward the front of the restaurant, leaving a tense silence between the two brothers. Has she been harping on this? Nasir asked, fishing out his phone. He couldn't wait any longer. He was desperate to see what Cassandra had written. After 2 full days of waiting for a word, a sign that he hadn't imagined her. Like an ethereal blonde princess haunting his memories. Only for the past 10 years, Basiri intoned, swirling his beer. He took a long chug, and then flagged down a waiter. Nasir sighed, swiping to his messages. Cassandra's text, an unknown number, shone back at him. Hey, Nasir. This is Cassandra. Hope you remember me from the wedding. How was the rest of your weekend? I'm still hearing the funeral dirge in my head. Is it haunting you like it is me? Hope you've had a great Monday using your Harvard business degree. Nasir grinned like a fool, rereading the message 2 more times. What are you reading? Basiri leaned over to peer at his screen. Nasir frowned and put the phone face down on the table. Nothing. You are seeing someone. I'm not. He cleared his throat, trying to erase the remnants of that feeling, the one that had seared through his chest like a lightning bolt while reading her words. He had to get back to neutral, even-keeled. We just met. It's a friend. She or he? He paused. He. Bullshit! Basiri laughed haughtily, taking another pull from his glass of beer. It's a she. It doesn't matter. We just met. It won't go anywhere. He shrugged. The words were as much for himself as his brother. I don't have time. He swiped to his email, like it might clear his head. An unknown new arrival. Welcome to Lasting Connections. He squinted at his screen, reading through a welcome email to some service. Right before he wrote it off as spam, he realized his mother had already signed him up for the matchmaking services, way before bringing it up tonight. That, or she'd worked fast from the bathroom. Time for what? Basiri pulled him back into conversation. A relationship. You don't need to have a relationship to get laid, brother. And I'm sure you have time for that. Nasir rolled his eyes. With 10 years between them, it was almost a joke that his 23-year-old brother was giving him advice about sex. Thanks for the tip. Basiri smiled smugly, but it fell quickly when his gaze moved across the restaurant. Here comes Mother. Nasir cleared his throat, straightening his posture, a reflex that persisted even into his 30s. Like Sophia might appear behind him and straighten it for him, just as she had during his adolescence. Basiri's words still echoed in his head, reminding him of a sad truth. He might be the eldest, but he certainly got laid the least. Maybe it was time for a little jaunt, something to take his mind off work for once. He wouldn't let his mother know, no matter how excited she'd be about the prospect of him reaching out to a woman. Neither of them needed to know about his private time, or just how excited he was at the idea of seeing Cassandra again, no matter where it led. Chapter 3. Cassandra gnawed on her lip as she waited in her apartment for the rideshare car to show up. She and Nasir had agreed to meet at a low-key dinner spot, but after Googling his suggestion, Cassandra thought it looked like fine dining with astronomical prices. I don't know if I should do this, Cassandra moaned to her friend and work colleague, Laura, who had come over to help her pick out the perfect outfit. She hadn't even told her friend Nasir's name, but she couldn't decide if it was because she didn't want to jinx it or because she didn't expect anything more than one date. We probably won't even have any chemistry this time around. It was a fluke, you know? Something in the air at the wedding. Laura leveled her with a look. Oh, please. You're a matchmaker, and one of the best. He obviously matches with you in some way. Yes, but we work with profiles, she said, rubbing her thumb over the silver clasp of her handbag. This guy doesn't have a profile. He just has that ridiculously attractive face. Laura snorted. So why don't you want to do this again? Because it's going to be awkward, and he'll realize he made a mistake, and I'll have the taxi ride of shame. Laura creased her brow. So, does the drive of shame involve sex or not? No, it involves returning early because your extremely sexy date realized he was drunk at the wedding, and it was all a farce. Jeez, Laura sighed. I've never seen you this anxious before. Listen, keep it simple. Why don't you just have sex with him and be done with it? Cassandra checked her phone for the billionth time. The car was 3 minutes away, like it had been for the past 5. I can't do that either. Why not? She shook her head. Because I like him. Laura cocked a brow. Even more reason to sleep with him. Cassandra huffed. 2 minutes away. The rideshare was a constantly nearing dot with no intention of arriving. I mean, I want to. I just don't want to like him even more. I know his type. He's all about business. I thought you said he didn't have a profile. He doesn't. I just picked up on it. So why should I sleep with him and fall for him when it won't go anywhere? She gnawed at the inside of her lip. I don't even want to date. Then why bother meeting up with him? Laura eased into her armchair. If that's how you feel about it. Because I want to see him. Laura grinned, shaking her head. You're impossible. Let's go downstairs and look around for the driver. He's probably circling the block wondering which apartment building is yours. Cassandra sighed. You're right. She let them out of the apartment, legs like jelly as she raced down the staircase in her matte black heels. She dressed conservatively but nicely, a simple high-necked but form-fitting black dress and silver earrings. She'd pulled her blonde hair tight to her head and knotted it in a low bun. She spotted the right make and model of the taxi creeping slowly down the street. She waved at the driver, and hugged Laura briefly before crossing the street to meet the car. In the back seat of the sedan, Cassandra tried to regain her cool. Nasir had offered to come pick her up, but she'd refused, choosing instead the slightly aloof and independent path, even though she was dying to see what he'd come get her in. Probably a helicopter. The car pulled up to an understated brick building with twinkle lights in each window. She hurried to the front porch and pulled open the door, a whoosh of conversation and garlic greeting her. She stepped inside the dimly lit restaurant, adjusting to her surroundings, fidgeting with an earring. As soon as she stepped inside, Nasir strolled into view, a broad grin on his face. "Cassandra!" He came up to her, leaning in. She froze as his face neared hers, struck dumb by the sudden affection. Was he already kissing her? He placed a quick kiss onto her cheek, the heat of him sinking into her, clouding her mind, hitching her breath. When he pulled away, his smile grew wider. Her mouth hung open, and she couldn't force a response out. "Sorry, was that too much?" He laughed, shoving his hands into his pockets. "It's how we greet people back home. Come on, let's go find our table." She stumbled after him, mind hazy, like the afterglow of an orgasm. "Just from a kiss. This guy is too intense. You should run, or have sex with him." She smiled politely at the hostess, thankful to find her facial muscles were finally taking orders, and weaved through a tightly packed restaurant full of small tables for two. They came to a table tucked up against a window overlooking a quaint, if small, back garden. Nasir held her chair for her as she settled into place, then helped her scoot in. "Wow." Finally, her voice returned. "I thought you said this was a low-key meetup," she said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. His grin could melt steel. "But it looks like you plan to wine and dine me." "So does that mean you want wine?" He opened a stiff board menu, perusing the options. "You pick everything. I want no say in the matter." She grinned. "Now you're just showing off." "I prefer to leave the choices to the lady." He set the menu down. "You're more beautiful than I remembered, Cassandra." She bit at her bottom lip, like it might hide the ear-to-ear smile. Heat crept into her cheeks. "Well, that's certainly a great way to start out a date." His gaze darted over her face, as if he was trying to memorize it. "I only speak the truth." "What other truths do you have?" She lifted a brow, trying to be flirty, but really she was hungry for details. The faster she could put together a makeshift profile of Nasir, the sooner she could determine if he was worth letting her guard down for. But she feared the walls were coming down of their own accord already. "Don't make me spill my truth so soon," he said. "We haven't even ordered wine. I'm not here to talk about me." "But I want to know." She batted her eyes, and he melted visibly. "It's important to know as much as possible about the man who is more handsome than I remembered." He cocked a grin just as the waitress arrived. It took Cassandra a moment to force her attention off Nasir. When asked for their drink order, Cassandra said, "A bottle of Prosecco. Whatever you have." When she left, Nasir opened his menu again. "We should really look, so we know by the time she comes back." Cassandra opened the menu, skimming the 2 pages. "There are no prices." "That's okay." Nasir glanced up at her. "You're not paying." She cast him a coy grin and read over the options twice before settling on the herb-encrusted halibut. Pushing the menu to the side, she leaned forward. "I made my decision. Now it's time for me to probe." He glanced over the top of his menu, his dark eyebrows arching. "Oh?" "Where are you from?" "Lebanon." He shut the menu. "Where are you from?" "Riverside." She narrowed her eyes. "Now what sort of work call would steal you away from a wedding?" He smiled, looking a little guilty. "One that comes from sharing a business with your 2 younger brothers, including one who frequently drops the ball." She relaxed. Now this was the interesting stuff. Do you run it? Technically, no. But practically? He hefted with a laugh, eyes following the waitress's hand as she returned to pour 2 glasses of Prosecco. I'm the one behind the wheel, and everything falls in my lap. The first crucial parts of his profile were solidifying. A punctual, traditional, responsible workaholic. Somehow, this was comforting. She wouldn't expect anything, and she wouldn't feel bad if he didn't expect anything either. A win-win, or lose-lose, if she got sad about it the next day. After the waitress took their orders and left them alone once more, Nasir lifted his glass. They clinked before taking sips of the bubbly beverage. What do you do? You said you knew the bride and groom from a work project. Her chest tightened. The vagueness that worked so well at the wedding wouldn't cut it here at this hyper-intimate dinner. I'm a consultant. For? Think of like inner office relations or mergers. She cleared her throat, mind careening through examples that might placate his curiosity without revealing the exact nature of her job. He nodded but didn't look convinced. Interesting. So you work inside different companies, or... Hey now, I said it was time for me to probe, not the other way around. She wagged a finger at him. The two kept up light-hearted conversation until dinner arrived, which segued into lots of moaning about how good the food was, which turned into a second bottle of Prosecco, which led into hours 2 and then 3 of conversation and coffee. By the time 10 p.m. rolled around, Cassandra was definitely tipsy, and a little shocked. This place is closing down, she said, draining the last sip from her glass. We should go. Nasir had paid the bill almost a half hour ago, but they'd whiled away the last dregs of the evening without noticing. He eyed her with a gleam in his eye. We should. She nodded, feeling the trails his gaze left over her body. Let's go then. I'll take you home. She bit her lip, trying to weigh the pros and cons of that through the haze. On the one hand, it was super convenient. On the other, she still had some distant duty to remain aloof and independent, strictly because she knew this couldn't and wouldn't go anywhere with Nasir. Neither of their lifestyles would allow it. His probably more by business, hers by choice. I can get a cab. No, let me take you home. He drained his glass, setting it on the table. I have a driver. Her brows shot up. A driver? Nasir nodded, pushing back from his seat. Come on. She wobbled to her feet, checking and then double-checking she had all her belongings with her, and followed Nasir until he offered his arm. She clung to him, thankful for the sturdy forearm, the wafting cologne, the heat of him that coated her in a pleasant blanket of security. What if you invited him up? The restaurant was nearly empty as they walked toward the front door. Nasir nodded to the hostess on their way out. Before them, a black Cadillac waited at the curb. This is mine, he said, hurrying ahead of her to open the back door. Let's go. She slid in wordlessly, unable to find an appropriate response. With Nasir, half of her knee-jerk reactions were girlish squeals or frustrated grunts of wonder. But it wasn't necessarily attractive or polite to highlight the socioeconomic differences of a date. She swallowed a sigh as he got into the back seat, from the other side of the car. He smiled over at her, the hazard lights clicking softly as the driver awaited instructions. Where do you live? She rattled off the address to the driver, her voice sounding strange and harsh in the quiet elegance of the upscale Cadillac. Once the car shifted into gear, Nasir let his head fall against the headrest. I must thank you for an incredible evening, he said, turning his head to look at her. I really don't do things like this. You were overdue, and apparently so was I. I've never had a 3-hour dinner before. He laughed softly. You're easy to talk to. The ride back to her place alternated between pleasant silence and soft conversation as the lights of Los Angeles whizzed past their bubble. When the driver pulled up to her street, she guided him to the appropriate building, where he parked without shutting off the car. Nasir nodded toward the front door. Let me walk you to your door. She nodded, pushing out of the car before he could jump around and open it like a gallant gentleman. He offered her his arm, which she took gratefully, for the tiny number of steps to the front door of her building. Thanks for the lovely evening, she said, weighing her words, half hoping he would suggest that they say screw it and just go to his house and fuck. Was this the Prosecco speaking? I really enjoyed myself. Way more than I thought I would, actually. Nasir turned to her, squeezing the sides of her arms. His hands were so hot, it seemed everything about him was abnormally warm, as if the man himself were made of molten lava. I can say the same. I should add, however, I expected to enjoy myself immensely. She laughed, feeling herself drift closer to him. Maybe she'd get a kiss out of the mix. That wouldn't be so bad. You're much more optimistic than I am. His dark gaze swept over her face. I'm just grateful to have met you. She sighed a little, pulling back, seeing the perfect out to say goodnight. He wasn't going to bring her back to his place. Just say goodnight. Do you want to come upstairs? The words left her mouth before she'd even thought of them, prompting both her and Nasir's eyes to widen. His answer came just as fast. Absolutely. She grinned, taking his hand in hers. Great. Follow me. Chapter 4. Nasir stumbled up the stairs behind Cassandra, eyes riveted to the sexy curve of her ass. He'd been dying to trace his hands up and down her body all night, but he had to play the part of the good boy. He couldn't risk scaring her away or making her think he only wanted sex. But if she suggested sex, well, that was a different story. The dating world was strange in his 30s, especially when it came to younger women. Hookups and dating had different rules that tended to completely change from one week to the next. Cassandra jiggled her key in a slate-gray door, and then pushed it open, gliding inside. Welcome to my lair. He stepped inside. The apartment was small but cute. Almost exactly what he'd expect for her. The deep burgundy couches looked plush and expensive, which matched the swept-back curtains, which also matched the decorative pieces on the coffee table. Probably her dishes were some shade of burgundy, too, which strangely thrilled him. He was desperate to find out. It's almost as cute as you, Nasir commented, strolling toward the far wall, which boasted framed photos from her life. Cassandra surrounded by girlfriends at her graduation, a funny picture of her with unknown kids when she was younger. Not what I expected for a lair. Not all lairs are full of bats and shackles, she said, slipping out of her heels. And you're the first guy to compare me to a home. She laughed, tossing the heels aside. His jaw clenched, and he couldn't rip his eyes off her. Something about the sexy unraveling at the end of a night was his favorite. The moment when the masks came off, suits unzipped, the real, fleshy cores revealed. When she sauntered his way, he caught her wrist, loving the sexy smirk that crossed her face. Maybe they both had the same idea. Should I tell my driver to leave? She jerked her head into a nod, and he pulled her into him, smoothing his hands over the lush swell of her hips, dipping his head so his lips brushed her cheek. I've wanted to kiss you since the wedding. He smoothed his lips down her cheekbone, skipping over her jaw. May I? Please. She clutched at his suit jacket, tilting her head back. The desperation in her voice pushed him over the edge. He cupped her jaw and covered her mouth with his, coaxing a soft, sweet kiss from her. The sweet tang of wine on her breath mixed with a hint of her flowery perfume. Need overcame him, sent a growl sputtering from him without his consent. He deepened the kiss, pressing his tongue into her mouth until it met hers, probing the taste of her, needing more. He cupped her head with both hands, unwilling to break this kiss ever. After multiple sloppy, luscious kisses, she whimpered. He pulled away, searching her face. "You should text your driver," she said, voice coming out choppy. He dipped in for another kiss. "I can't stop kissing you now that I've started. He'll figure it out." She giggled through a kiss. "Are you sure? That would be horrible for him to wait for hours." He pressed his forehead against hers, loving the view from so close. Her blue eyes were almost ice. "Okay, I'll text him." He kissed her again and finally ripped himself away to focus on something other than her fragrant mouth. He cleared his throat as if it might clear his mind. Fishing his phone out of his pocket, he unlocked the phone to draft a message to his driver. From the corner of his eye, he could tell Cassandra was moving seductively. He glanced up at her, his mouth parting. Her dress was unzipped, and she'd inched it all the way up to her waist. Black lace panties greeted him, and he tossed his phone aside. "Finish your message," she said, voice sultry and firm. He sighed, jaw flexing. This wasn't fair. He grabbed his phone from the couch cushion and fumbled his passcode twice. Finally, it unlocked, and he returned to the message draft. "I'll call you when I need you." He hit the send button and tossed the phone, gaze sliding back to her just as she tugged her dress overhead. A matching black lace bra hugged her full breasts perfectly. He swallowed hard, willing himself not to jump her bones. "You're making this very difficult for me." "Why?" Her half-lidded eyes highlighted the mischief in her voice. "Because I'm seconds away from devouring you." He stepped closer, catching her at the dip in her waist. She inhaled sharply, batting her eyes at him. "Well, why don't you just do that?" The husky edge to her voice snapped the last vestige of his control. He scooped her up into his arms easily, pleased by the surprised giggle that escaped her. "Where's your bedroom?" She pointed with her toe toward a door in the back corner. "Over there, sir."
Sorry, readers. Here's where we fade to black due to YouTube explicit content guidelines. If you dream for the steam, you'll need to take a look in the book.
Their gazes locked and something sweet passed between them, something that made her stomach twist. One-night stands weren't her forte, and the thought of this sweetness turning into disappointment crashed like a jet into her post-coital days. Because the secret truth remained. This man wasn't hers, and he wouldn't be. Cassandra sighed, turning onto her back. She studied the ceiling like it might have some answers. Nasir's hand smoothed over her belly, and he tugged her closer to him, inviting her to snuggle. She giggled, nestling into the hollow of his neck, allowing herself the simple pleasures of his fragrant heat, his fiery touch, his breath at her temple. He felt too good. It would be too easy to want this. She tilted her head to look up at him, searching for answers there. "Stay the night, please." She wanted him to cradle her until morning, when they'd wake up and have sex again and then maybe again. But the longer he stayed at her side, the greater the chance that he would be the first to leave her in the dust. "That was so lovely," she said, smoothing her fingertips over the back of his hand. "I wish I could stay up longer. I have an early meeting tomorrow, though." Silence settled between them, and she avoided his gaze. He shifted beside her, putting some space between them. Realization was setting in. Shit. Nasir propped himself up on an elbow, his brow creasing. I understand. I kept you up late. She offered a smile before he rolled out of bed and started dressing. He faced away from her as he tugged up his pants, hiding those glorious caramel apple butt cheeks. Just have him stay. But it was too late. She'd drawn the line. I had a really great time tonight, she said, sitting up, bunching the sheets around her. The words hung painfully in the air. Thank you for dinner and everything. God, this was getting worse by the second. Nasir shrugged his shirt on, looking amused. It was my pleasure, Cassandra. As he buttoned up his shirt, he came to the edge of the bed. I hope it's not the last time I take you out. She smiled up at him, a flutter of hope streaking through her belly. Well, me too. He leaned down, pressing his lips to her forehead, then against her own. The kiss was sweet in a way that made her regret the dumb charade of the early morning meeting. He needed to stay here, with her, in her bed, for as long as humanly possible. I'll call you soon. He adjusted his belt, then knocked her chin. As she moved to get off the bed, he added, Don't move. I can let myself out. You just rest. She smiled at him, sinking back into the bed. Thanks, Nasir. Good night. Good night, Cassandra. He blew a kiss to her before heading out into the living room. Once she heard the front door click shut, she reached for her phone, swiping to the message thread with Nasir. She stilled her fingers as she began typing out a message. It was too soon. She'd already fucked up by sleeping with him on the first date. If she wanted to see if Nasir was really something, she needed to play her cards right. She'd give him a couple of days, see if he reached out, see how interested he was, now that they'd already visited the inside of her bedroom. Cassandra wasn't in the market to get hurt, but more importantly, she wasn't in the market to have meaningless flings. A few moments later, her telephone buzzed. She reached for it, curiosity pacing under her chin, wondering if it might be Nasir. It was. Good night, beautiful. She read the text over and over again, just 2 words that could kick up such a maelstrom of giddiness inside her. She clutched the phone to her chest, burying an excited squeal into the pillow. Chapter 5. Cassandra awoke the next morning feeling like a helium balloon floating over the most gorgeous landscape. Everything she looked at had a special glow to it, all the way down to her toothbrush. She grinned into the mirror as she brushed her teeth. Today was going to be awesome. Post-coital bliss sure was a thing, one that she'd forgotten about entirely. She hummed as she headed into the living room to start the workday. Every Friday she worked from home, and she belted out her favorite guilty pleasure Rihanna song while she waited for the computer to load. Clicking through the startup windows, she navigated to her email client. A long string of emails awaited her, and one was marked with the red exclamation point. It was from her boss, with the subject, New client! Interesting case, you'll be perfect for it. Cassandra smiled, standing up to go brew some coffee. She loved being hand-picked for client cases. In the afterglow of an amazing orgasm, she also wanted to relish feeling chosen. Her career goals included being the dependable one, the matchmaker everyone turned to for advice, and she was already well on her way. Cassandra made a cup of coffee in her single-serve Keurig, humming vehemently, wondering what Nasir was doing right then. When she settled into her seat once more, she hugged the mug of coffee close to her mouth as she scanned the urgent email. Her boss had a quick note at the top of the new client profile. Hey, Cassandra. New case came in a few days ago. A high-profile client looking for a business-oriented match. I just went ahead and assigned it to you because I know you'll love the challenge. Per her protocol, Cassandra saved the name for the last when reviewing a case. Something about reading a person's responses before attaching them to a name allowed her to better understand them. She could always guess gender correctly, but also sometimes profession and background. Finding out the name was a cherry on top, the final piece of the puzzle. Mr. CEO. She scrolled through the responses, finding the applicant a bit dry and narrow-minded. He wanted a business partner, or he wanted a trophy wife. Family was important, but his standard of living was just a bit more important. To her, it sounded like he wanted a rich wife who was the CEO of her own company, who would also bake cookies with his mother on holidays. Some of the answers contradicted each other, revealing a possible internal conflict on the applicant's part. At 35, he seemed well off and financially secure. Excitement licked through her as she neared the end of the profile, eager to attach a name to the personality. Her eyes flicked up to the top, where her thumb covered the namespace. She yanked it aside, gobbling up the name. Nasir Azhar. She blinked once and then twice. She reread it so many times that her vision went blurry. Just to make sure this wasn't a joke, that she was 100% understanding this correctly, that her amazing night hadn't actually morphed into some sick alternate reality during her sleep. Nasir Azhar. She drew a shaky breath, gaze drifting to the far wall. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was just a freakish coincidence, the kind that arrives like a drunk brute to the party and turns over tables and kicks in the china cabinet. She clicked onto the phone image and grimaced. There he was, the gorgeous Lebanese businessman, the delectable star of their amazing night together, her memory of whom was entirely different from the man presented in this profile. He had been her client since 4:34 p.m. the day before, which meant their entire date had been one huge breach of ethics, not to mention a total waste of time. She ran through the profile again, gobbling up the words more intensely, applying each one specifically to Nasir. Dismay uncoiled inside her, slick and insidious. Whoever this man was, if he was truly the Nasir she knew or vice versa, was not a fit for Cassandra, which meant that anything that might transpire between them was doomed to fail. Maybe he'd been showing her a carefully executed facade, something to simply woo her, get her into bed. If he'd been signing up for matchmaking services, roughly since the evening they met, then apparently he knew exactly what he wanted, and Cassandra was just some fun diversion. She buried her face in her hands, letting the sorry truth sink into her. Getting her hopes up was the dumbest thing she could have done. She'd even tried to circumvent the hurt by preventing him from spending the night, but still the disappointment found a way through. She didn't want to be a trophy wife, and she didn't want to be his business partner. She wasn't even sure of what she wanted, but it sure as hell wasn't anything his profile called for. Cassandra set her mug down gently, all of the bliss from the previous night crashing into ugly shards. She'd been so hopeful and excited for a mere 12 hours, and now it was an ugly shadow, something scarred and shameful. How had she let herself get so excited? She and Nasir would never fit, not in a million years. The profiles never lied. Furthermore, there was no way she could work the case of a man she'd slept with, no matter how mind-blowing or earth-shattering the sex had been. It would be completely wrong of her to now act as his matchmaker. She heaved a sigh, clicking reply on the email. She'd tell her boss she just couldn't do it now, the less detail the better, and ask that Laura take it instead. And she wasn't sure which stung more, telling her boss that her confident choice had been mistaken for some reason, or finding out that the man she'd been very secretly and quickly falling for had turned out to be the biggest dead end of all time. By Monday morning, Nasir felt considerably uneasy, like a door had been left ajar inside him, allowing a cold gust inside, but he couldn't find out where to shut the door. The entire weekend, he waited for Cassandra to respond to one of his various texts. They'd ranged from sexy to sweet to cloying, all of them inviting a response or another meetup. Already he missed her scent, the feel of her pressed up to him, the way her kisses danced feather light over his forehead in her bed. But something was off, and after Monday came and went, he feared he'd never get his response. Each sound from his phone made him hopeful that Cassandra had finally gotten around to responding. Maybe some last-minute emergency stole her from regular communication, and now would begin the barrage of catch-up texts. Around 6 p.m., Monday, his phone dinged with a new email. The sender was unknown by the email client, but bore an interesting subject line. Introducing your love detective. He sighed, swiping into the email, finding a peppy welcome message from the matchmaker at the agency his mother had chosen. It included general information about the process and suggested a meeting time for him to review potential matches with his so-called love detective, someone named Laura. He huffed, swiping his phone off. Maybe the love detective could figure out why Cassandra hadn't responded even once to his texts. He'd thought ghosting was something reserved for college kids, not what a mature, put-together woman in her mid-20s would do. All those countless sheets of probing questions and tireless entry fields requesting him to detail his ideal future. He could barely remember what he'd filled out, but maybe they were his real shot at finding a suitable match, like his mother had suggested all along. Chapter 6. Cassandra nibbled on her bottom lip as she stared at the plastic bag on her countertop. It was 8 a.m., and now would be the best time, but she needed to start the workday. Maybe bad news was better saved for the weekend, so she could unwind and fret and cry into the couch if the result turned out as she feared. The bag held a pregnancy test. She'd bought it the night before, just as a precaution. She'd been mostly sure that her unprotected sex with Nasir more than 2 weeks ago had fallen outside of her fertile window, but it was better to be sure. The nausea yesterday morning was certainly new, even though that was probably just a random sensitive stomach, but still, it was better to check, just to see. So she could find out if that super sexy, totally not supposed to happen one-night stand really was about to change her life forever. She turned away from the island and headed for her open laptop on the coffee table. Work called. The test could wait. Besides, maybe she wasn't quite ready to know. Maybe she could suck up her last moments as a non-mother single woman. You're being histrionic. You've probably just been stressed from work. As soon as she sat down, her phone vibrated with a call. She picked it up, half sorry that Nasir's messages had stopped sometime the week before. But what did she expect? A man would only try so long before he realized he was being ignored. Guilt flashed through her, but she snuffed it. Social awkwardness was not her favorite thing. She'd done a doozy with Nasir, but there was no other way. What could she tell him? Hey, I think you're great, but I secretly saw your confidential file and know we're woefully mismatched. Also, I think you used me for sex. Also, bye. No. It was easier to ignore and wait it out. She'd rejected him. He'd gotten the message. Life moved on. Even though his memory continued to niggle at her daily. Laura was calling. Cassandra swiped the phone on, pressing it to her ear. Hello? Girl, I need your help. Laura clicked through her emails as she listened. What's up? I hate to do this, but can you take over a meet and greet for me? Laura's voice betrayed her regret. I know you passed that Lebanese client to me, but I just can't make it today. I've been puking since last night, and there's no end in sight. Cassandra furrowed a brow, anxiety jolting through her. Fuck. Are you okay? Did you eat something? I think it's food poisoning, Laura sighed. At any rate, I just can't make it, but could you? Pretty please? Cassandra checked her planner, splayed open to the side of the laptop. She grimaced, shaking her head, like this might convince the universe to stop the cruel joke already. If she said no, she'd have to explain why. Probably. What time? It's a cafe meet and greet at 2 p.m. I scheduled it for the gathering grounds, so you'll have plenty of space to talk. Cassandra pinched the bridge of her nose. Meet and greets were her favorite part of the job. The first chance to meet the client, get a real handle on their wishes and desires, and then begin piecing together the subtle things they'd left out of their profile. But a meet and greet with Nasir? Pure torture. Cassandra gnawed at the inside of her lip, willing the words to emerge. I got you, girl. Laura groaned. Thank you. I owe you so much. If he's good, you can have him back. Just take my commission. Thanks. Not. All his recent files are on the server. I'll send you the link. But it shouldn't be a big deal. I'm sure you saw the original profile anyway. Just a CEO and his overbearing mother. Ah, my specialty. Laura laughed and then groaned. Oh, the stomach spasms. God, let them stop. Go lie down. Drink water or something. Cassandra's heart pounded in her ears, desperate to find some last-minute way out of this. Maybe she could come down with a stomach virus and pass the case off to her boss. But no, that would never work. Turning down work twice would not go over well. If only it didn't make me puke, Laura said miserably. I'll send you these links before the next wave hits me. Thanks a ton, girl. I really do owe you. Cassandra hung up the phone, slumping against the couch. If anything, she'd learned something new that morning. Anxiety made the indigestion worse. There was no backing out of this one. She just needed to take a good long time to organize her game plan. Cassandra dedicated her whole life to love and successful matches, which was why she knew from a mile away that she and Nasir could never succeed together, which meant that whatever the results were of that test on the counter, they were for her eyes only. Nasir's mother called his cell phone just as he shut the front door of his penthouse. Hello, Mother. I'm here, son. Waiting downstairs for you. Of course she was. She'd been waiting for this day like a grade schooler antsy to take a trip to the moon. I'm coming down now, Mother. Be there in a moment. He swiped his phone off as he stepped into the elevator, adjusting his suit jacket. Work the past couple of weeks had been hellish, but that was partially of his own doing. Certain things needed to be avoided, in particular, the incision left by Cassandra's inglorious ghosting since their date. It still smarted, actually. Maybe that's what he got for taking a first date into territory like that. She'd burned him because he'd allowed himself to be burnt. He'd already been falling for her after seeing her twice. What sort of madness was that? Her ignoring his phone calls and texts. That had to be for the best. Work was priority, and she would have only been a distraction. That's what he continued to tell himself, at least. The elevator doors whooshed open on the main floor of his building, and he strode out, nodding at the receptionist. The lobby of the apartment building was a clean, simple transition between home and the real world, and he couldn't help but be thankful to the architects who designed it. Only a little bit of the Los Angeles beyond was visible through the front lobby, like the building shielded its residents from seeing too much, from leaping too quickly. Beyond the front doors, his car idled at the curb, his mother no doubt behind the tinted back window. The front doors slid open as he approached, and he hurried to the back seat. At the other side of the car, his mother sat primly, smiling like a minx. There you are, looking handsome as always. She leaned forward to kiss his cheek as he settled in. My eldest son, my pride and joy. He couldn't help the grin that crossed his face as the car rolled into motion. No, Mother. This is a big day for you. She patted his arm. I'm very hopeful this will go well. He adjusted the watch on his left wrist, watching the passing traffic with distant awareness. Yes, well, if it doesn't, we should demand our money back. I've filled out enough questionnaires and quizzes to find at least 3 soulmates. Sophia tutted. Come now. That's important information. They use it to match you well. I guess I'll be the judge of that. Cassandra crossed his mind, like a meteor streaking across the night sky. Almost 3 weeks later, and she wasn't gone from his memory yet. Maybe she'd never fully disappear. Yes. Something in her tone told him that Sophia thought maybe she'd be the judge of that too. I'm sure they'll have lovely selections. I bet your wife is waiting for you. We're not meeting the actual women today, remember? Just looking at their profiles, making the selection. Sophia waved him off, like he was being irrational. Yes, I know. But they might have found her already. She could be looking at your profile across town tonight, as well. Nasir shook his head. When did you become such a romantic? I'm not. Sophia's ruby-red lips thinned into a line. Their destination was a hip cafe known for its ample gathering space and out-of-this-world lattes. The matchmaker had suggested it as a low-key, late-lunch option, which of course reminded him of Cassandra again, and the precious quirk in her lips when she was about to make a joke, or the way she'd responded to his restaurant selection. After a few moments of silence, Sophia turned to him again. Did you disclose the family business in the profile? He swallowed an annoyed sigh. I filled everything out exactly as we discussed. Don't worry. Her eyes narrowed. I just don't want anyone trying to take advantage of you. Sophia had personally reviewed all the interview and profile questions prior to him receiving them, so she'd had plenty of suggestions as to how to fill out each section. And in the wake of Cassandra's ghosting, her direction seemed wisest. Find somebody who could match him in business. It seemed terribly sterile and boring, like the safest sort of stock trade. Somewhere down the road it would pay off. Surely he could come to love someone after enough years. And maybe even children together, even if it didn't include the magnetic tug surrounding Cassandra. The car slowed near a trendy patio trimmed with wrought iron and paper lanterns. The cafe name matched their destination. Here we are. Let's go. He pushed the car door open and stepped out, holding the door for his mother. She lowered her sunglasses, sniffing. Shall we? He gestured for her to lead the way and followed her inside the brick building. Notes of hazelnut and coffee blasted him as they stepped inside. Soft jazz meandered through the mostly open floor plan of the cafe. A cash register sat next to a long display case of baked goods, but tables and chairs took up the rest of the space. Who are we looking for? Nasir smoothed down the front of his shirt, anxiety licking through him. Laura was the original one, Sophia said, pushing her sunglasses back on her head. But I got an email last minute that Laura couldn't be here, so her colleague is meeting us. Sophia's hawkish eyes scanned the room. Her name is Cassandra. She's a blonde lady. She said she'd find us. The name sizzled through him like a lightning strike, and hope sparked inside his chest. Could it be? But no, that was just his hopefulness again, ruining his life on a daily basis. His gaze swung around the room until he saw her, the blonde heading straight toward them, glossy hair pulled back into a smart bun, black pencil skirt hugging curves he'd known for only a night. Her face bore confusion and forced friendliness. Nasir felt rooted to his spot, voice sticking to his throat as he struggled to find one single emotion to settle on among the tumult within. Cassandra came to a stop in front of them, hands clasped together. You must be Nasir and Sophia. Chapter 7. Nasir settled into the cafe chair, feeling like his head was about to pop off. The music and chatter of the cafe around them was a distant hum as he struggled to get his grip on the situation. Cassandra was in front of him, glowing and professional, treating him like they'd never even met before. His stomach cinched into a knot. Sophia grinned at Cassandra like she was a queen. Please excuse me. I'm going to freshen up quickly. She sashayed away, purse slung over her shoulder, weaving through the tightly packed tables. Nasir clasped his hands beneath the table, wondering where to begin. Cassandra shuffled papers. So, a consultant, huh? He jerked his gaze up to meet hers and saw regret there, a flash of confusion. I don't like to tell people what I do. She cleared her throat, pushing a pile of papers to the side, especially when interpersonal relations are involved. He hefted with a laugh. Is that why you never called back? Cassandra cleared her throat, flattening her hand against the tabletop to examine her nails. We're not looking for each other, Nasir. It's very obvious. Nasir crossed his ankle over a knee, jaw flexing with frustration. He hated being ignored, but being ignored by someone like Cassandra was even worse. There had been something there. Something he'd believed in sincerely, if only for a few days. She'd been a glimmer of possibility, a sudden, beautiful sunrise along a dreary journey. He laughed bitterly. Yes, you made that very clear. Nasir withstood the tense silence following his words, trying not to look at her, not even a glance. The perfectly smooth blonde hair tugged at his attention, begged him to look while he could. He'd been desperate for a glimpse of her since their night together, but now it was all wrong. Sophia came back to the table, beaming, and settled into her seat, reaching out for Cassandra's hand. I'm so thankful for the work you do. Cassandra laughed, color creeping into her neck. Matchmaking is truly an art, and luckily I have the track record to prove that I know what I'm talking about. Nasir cleared his throat, drumming his fingers on the table. And have you ever been wrong? He fiddled with his watch, perfecting his air of disinterest. You know, with the matches, or just about who might be good together in general. Sophia cast him a sharp glance, and Cassandra reached for her papers. Well, sure. I'm not right 100% of the time, but I can guarantee I'll find you the best options available to you. Nasir shifted in his seat. So you think you know exactly what I want? He couldn't help the snarl. It came of its own volition now. Based on your profile, yes. Cassandra gave a strained smile. Now, as you know, I'm standing in for Laura, who had originally compiled a few different options for Nasir. Since reviewing your case today, though, I've added a couple extra. I think you'll both be pleased by some of the options here, and I've printed out a summary of each lady for you to look at. She pushed a small stack of papers their way. Each woman has been matched primarily on the factors you indicated were most important: work and travel. Sophia tutted as she looked at the first page with Nasir. She has a lovely, strong nose. Nasir glanced at the page, nodding, receiving each sheet after his mother was finished. He saw the profiles without really reading it. His mind was too worked up to properly digest anything right now. A frothy mixture of snark and confusion bubbled up inside him. Ooh, look at this one. His mother leaned over, sharing the sheet with him. She's a pretty Muslim girl named Vida, Masters in Business Finance. He nodded, staring at the sheet, the words a dancing blur. Vida was the clear winner. She scored all the points for a business marriage, but she wasn't Cassandra, and for some reason, he still only wanted Cassandra. Yes, she looks absolutely perfect. Exactly the woman I've dreamed of my entire life. His mother cast a quizzical glance his way but continued reviewing the profiles. After they had reviewed each sheet, she turned to him with a broad smile. What a great selection. Any favorites? He cleared his throat, spreading the sheets out in front of him. Each woman was beautiful in her own way, at least judging by the curated photos on display, but he had to be real with himself. Business made the most sense. And if Cassandra wouldn't have him, then he'd have the woman least like her, just to prove his point. Let's do Vida. Sophia beamed as Cassandra collected the sheets again. Great. I think you've made a very good choice. She seemed to be one of the most compatible profiles based on your answers, actually. Oh, now isn't that sweet? Sophia leaned into him, inviting his agreement. Great. Nasir checked his watch. Are we done here? I have a board meeting. Cassandra hesitated. Sure. I'll be in touch to arrange the first date. Something relaxed and casual. Definitely low-key. He arched a brow, wondering if maybe that was a reference to his own low-key dinner suggestion the first time they'd met. His belly flopped, and he nodded. Great. Looking forward to it. As he stood, Sophia leaned over the table to grab Cassandra's hand. He's a very busy man, you see. Please excuse his rudeness. Sophia cast a sharp glance up at him and then stood, smoothing down her dress. Cassandra smiled, but it looked uncertain. She glanced at him only briefly, focusing instead on his mother. I'll be reaching out soon. Nasir stormed out of the cafe, texting the driver on his way out. Under the bright midday sun, he paced the sidewalk, hands in his pockets. Sophia came out a moment later, looking cross. What was that display? Her Arabic came out sharp and fast, like daggers. Why are you so agitated? Nasir clenched his jaw, looking over her shoulder. It's nothing. Hard day at work. Which is precisely why you need to get away from work every once in a while and meet someone, she spat. Sophia huffed, hoisting her purse higher on her shoulder. In English, she said, You'll thank me for this someday. Their car appeared around the corner. The further he drove, the more his anxiety dissipated. I'm sure I will, and maybe it will be fine. Vida looks lovely, Sophia said, patting his shoulder, her voice softer. She might be the one. Nasir tutted as the car slowed to a stop at the curb. He opened the front door for his mother to slip in the back seat, not finding the strength to confront the thoughts swirling inside his head. He doubted Vida would be anything but a suggested one, but maybe his mother was right. Taking a look couldn't hurt, and somehow it was a perverse happiness that Cassandra was at the helm of this. It meant she had to respond to him now, and maybe he could wheedle his way back in. Chapter 8. Cassandra stayed glued to her seat in the cafe for what felt like a full hour after Nasir and Sophia left. She watched him pace the sidewalk like an angry bull, craning to see over heads occasionally blocking her view of their conversation. The sight of him out there reminded her of a movie. She was the heroine, hiding a potentially life-changing secret, even though it was most likely just a sensitive stomach or adult-onset gluten intolerance, while the handsome, dashing, painfully skilled lover bolted out of the building after receiving final confirmation of being scorned. Cassandra hiccuped, and then a sob escaped her. She gulped, shocking herself into silence, wiping away the fat tears that had fallen before anyone looked or noticed. What has gotten into you? She couldn't be so emotionally distraught after a meeting like that. It had gone well, for all intents and purposes, especially given the fact she'd slept with a client, and that information could ruin her career. The number one rule of a matchmaker: do not match with the client. This meant that dalliances, traipses, and affairs of any kind were strictly prohibited. The industry was sensitive to the insinuation that matchmaking agencies were akin to hookup agencies. Cassandra fought tooth and nail to uphold her spotless reputation, and suddenly it was at a risk of crumbling. This situation could become the sand she'd mistaken for bedrock when constructing this career. There is no way in hell you can see him again. Her own one-night stand awkwardness aside, the fact that he was a paying client of her company made their brief dating history and non-existent future completely forbidden territory. She'd protect it like Area 51, any intruder shot on sight, and nobody could know this potential baby but probably just gas situation was his. This resolve helped relieve some of the anxiety. She packed up her things and headed for home, repeating the decision to herself. No matter what, nobody finds out about Nasir. Because what if she was pregnant? And she decided not to keep it? She brought herself up short. What was she thinking? Of course she would keep it. It would be Nasir's. The idea swirled strange and foreign inside her. It was too early for all the what-ifs. As soon as she got back to the apartment, she dropped her stuff and headed for the plastic bag on the counter. She was supposed to take it first thing in the morning, but screw it. She'd buy a second one if need be. She had to know something, and fast. Tearing open the packaging, the long white stick felt strange in her hand as she headed to the bathroom. This thing determined her fate. Would let her know whether a curveball headed straight for her. Anxiety churned in her belly as she sat on the toilet, stick poised awkwardly between her legs. Was she ready to be a mother? Ever since her own parents' messy and violent divorce, she'd sworn to enter the marriage and kids fray with all her ducks in a row. Not to be with someone just because they knocked her up, like her mother did. Sure, she loved her dad and loved her mom, but together those two were toxic. They'd convinced the world they were perfect, while behind the scenes they were a snarling, unraveling mess. If anything, Cassandra was grateful for the divorce for showing her what she didn't want. Which meant she would never be with Nasir, or anyone, simply because she'd gotten pregnant. She wanted a partner, not a guy who saw her as an obligation. She wouldn't settle for anything less either. Finally, a trickle of pee came out, and she strained to see if she hit the mark. Once her bladder was empty, she set the stick on the side of the sink, yanking her gaze away, unable to watch it change. Once she'd wiped and flushed, Cassandra left the bathroom to pace the kitchen. She'd wait a full 3 minutes, just in case the test needed extra time to marinate, come to a decision, decide her future. She didn't look away from the clock, each minute dragging by like an hour. As the last second of the 3rd minute ticked by, she hurried back into the bathroom, not breathing, so eager for the result she could barely even see straight. The stick had come to a decision. A big plus sign stared back at her. Her mouth fell open, and she stared at it for a long time. That explained the midday unsanctioned crying and the indigestion after eating. Pregnant. The word swirled around in her head like an unidentified fleck in a glass of water. It didn't feel quite right yet, but she needed some time to figure it out, sit with it. Cassandra stumbled into the living room, reaching for her phone, finding some new work emails waiting for her. Sophia had sent one soon after departing, stating, "Thank you so much for your efforts and time. We appreciate it. Please contact Nasir directly to coordinate the date and time of his meeting with Vida." The number in the email was the same one she'd been ignoring for 2 weeks. What a crippling dose of irony. Better late than never, even if it was work-related now. She tapped out a quick message to Nasir, ignoring the long stream of unanswered texts before hers. "This is Cassandra. Just touching base so we can get you set up with Vida." His response was lightning fast. The man basically lived with his phone in his hand. "Ah, so I did have the right number all along." She grimaced. She deserved it. But given the results of the test, maybe she should reconsider giving his case back to Laura, or shoving it off on her boss once and for all. Their history was bad enough. Now their futures were technically entwined, which made her wholly unfit to continue with him. "I can step down if you'd feel more comfortable. I took this case over as a favor to my colleague. But I'd understand if you'd prefer to work with her." Anxiety gnawed at her as she awaited his response, and deep inside, she hoped he wouldn't ask her to step down. Maybe she'd be grateful for the access to him, even if it was entirely professional. She never could resist poking at the bruise. "No, don't step down." That was it. No reasoning or explanation, simply the directive. She creased her brow, rereading it a few times. What other reason could he have for keeping her, beyond wanting to make her suffer through the awkwardness? Maybe he was a sadist. She'd picked up on enough hothead alpha vibes from him, and although curtailed and controlled, he seemed to like wielding the power. "Are you sure?" She typed out a fast response. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I promise this can be painless and professional if you choose it." He responded quickly. "I'm not a child, just busy. You do your job, and I'll do mine. No need to back out. I'll meet with Vida." She slid the phone away, letting his words sink in. Clearly, he was salty about the poor treatment. But she'd seen the writing on the wall, a glimpse she never should have had. The whole thing was a clusterfuck, and now, even more entangled, a hopeless knot she herself had helped to start. She was carrying his child, albeit mere cells, inside her body, and he himself had declared he didn't really want children in his profile. So where did that leave her? Something nagged at her in the back of her mind, the whisper that there might be more to Nasir. But she couldn't listen to that voice at a time like this, because when that voice was proven wrong somewhere down the road, she'd have only herself to blame. And she wouldn't let history repeat itself. Not when she was manning the wheel. Chapter 9. Safia didn't stay long after the meetup with Cassandra. These days, her priorities were split between Nasir's love life and Asim's infant daughter. Basiri took a back seat, which he suspected was a relief for his youngest brother, who preferred to leave his shenanigans securely in the shadows. Her return to Lebanon was a relief for him as well. His mother was all about pushing to attend the dates herself, so maybe she could take notes or record parts of the conversation for posterity. Who knew with that woman? She wanted the best for her sons, and she wanted it aggressively. Cassandra didn't take long to schedule the casual dinner date. Their text messages were stilted and bursting. At least it felt that way to him, because he knew there was some reason she had turned off the attraction. It felt like a switch she'd flipped, some sort of overarching plan to not give in to him. Because why wouldn't she want him? He could see no reason for her to act like this, and he was desperate to know why. Basiri's snark appeared in his head. "Well, maybe she just doesn't like you, brother. Ever think of that?" He scoffed at the idea. There was no mistaking that attraction. It had charred the edges of the bed. She changed her mind. The idea haunted him as he left the office and hopped into the car to go to the dinner date. But why? If he could hire an emotional detective, he would. Certainly couldn't use his love detective, because that was Cassandra herself. Or maybe a psychic. Something to crack the impenetrable shell of Cassandra's life. Maybe he'd done something horribly wrong and remained unaware. Not like Cassandra would ever tell him. Nasir's mind didn't stop running in all directions during the ride to the restaurant. Crossing Cassandra's path again felt like a second chance he wasn't quite sure how to capitalize upon. The rational, even-keeled part of him murmured that he should stay distant, act aloof. The raucous core of him, the part he didn't often let the world see, begged him to pursue her. Tonight's dinner date was set up in Diggsy's, a bright and clamorous upscale diner where he and Vida would chat and eat without pressure. As soon as he stepped onto the black and white checkered floor, a woman stepped forward to greet him. Thick, black hair was cropped into a bob, and her dark, almond-shaped eyes seemed familiar. It had to be Vida, because she certainly recognized him. "Hello, are you Vida?" She nodded. "The one and only. You must be Nasir." "Indeed I am." He offered his hand, and she took it. Her grip was dry and elicited nothing, not even a mild spark. "Shall we sit down?" Vida conferred with the hostess, who quickly led them to a high-backed red leather booth in the back corner of the diner. Nasir and Vida slid into opposite sides. Already his smile felt strained. "So, we matched." Vida lifted a brow. Already the flirting had started, but his heart wasn't in it. Not even for a little bit of fun. We did. He adjusted his watch while a waitress left water glasses. Though I must say, I've never done this before. What, meet a lady for dinner? She sipped at her water, amusement in her eyes. I didn't think you'd be so pure. He laughed. What I mean is, I've never used a matchmaker. I am terribly busy with work, so that tends to consume every second of my time. She lifted a brow. What sort of work do you do? I run the American division of my family's business. We deal in green technology and renewable energy. Vida pulled back a little. You don't say. I'm in renewable energy too, primarily solar. I suppose this shouldn't surprise me. We did match, after all. The two chatted about their roles within the respective companies and shared some insider complaints of the industry. The conversation flowed naturally, putting him at ease. They broke only to place orders and talked about their jobs until the food came. Wow. He watched as the waitress placed the steaming plate in front of him, an oversized portobello mushroom burger with a side of chunky sweet potato fries greeted him. I guess we've been talking about work for a while. Vida sighed, nodding. Yes, I found it a bit boring, to be honest. His eyes widened. Excuse me? She laughed, reaching for his arm. Don't take it the wrong way. It's just that we talk about business all day, every day. We're supposed to be here to go on a date. It doesn't feel like you actually are, though. I thought I was, Nasir said, unrolling his napkin from around the silverware. It's okay. Maybe you'll prove me wrong. She winked. Or not. That's fine, too. He furrowed a brow, staring at the lightly grilled bun on his plate. I'm sorry if I... She waved a hand in the air, as though dismissing him. Please, I'm not offended. I just think it's better to be honest. Why waste time? True, he said, swirling a sweet potato fry in ketchup. But I don't want you to think that I'm not, well... What, ready to marry me? She laughed, then blew on a spoonful of soup. I'm not so eager that I expect a marriage proposal after a half hour. Please. Besides, who says I'd want to marry you? He cocked a grin. Hey now, we matched. And are therefore obligated to be a success story. She tipped the soup into her mouth. In all seriousness, I do wonder how someone like you hasn't found the right woman yet. You seem to be a catch. He sighed. The perennial question. It's simple. I don't date. I don't have the time. If you don't date, you don't meet anyone. She swirled her spoon in the soup. Just based on I don't know, your energy. My first read was that you had met someone already. He arched a brow. Really? He took a bite of his sandwich and chewed thoughtfully. After swallowing, he asked, My energy? She grinned like she had a secret. I'm a perceptive woman, Nasir. Let's just leave it at that. He narrowed his eyes. Was this the emotional psychic he'd been wishing for? I'm half scared, half intrigued. That's exactly the combination I aim for. She dipped a piece of bread into her soup. So, who is she? He took another bite of his sandwich to buy time, relishing the tangy orange sauce they'd drizzled on the portobello, whatever it was. She's someone I met recently, but it wouldn't be appropriate to pursue her. Vida cocked a brow. Why not? Tell me more about her. Nasir cleared his throat, dabbing at his mouth with his napkin. Well, she's the first woman I've felt this way toward in... He sighed. I don't even know how long. I met her at a friend's wedding. I noticed her right away, and I couldn't stop looking. She just drew me in. We were seated at the same table, like in some movie. Vida tutted. Aww. So I asked to sit next to her, and the chemistry was immediate. I presume you didn't talk her ear off about business to start with, then? Vida smirked. Right, but I had to leave early precisely because of business. So I left her with my card, and we started texting. We went on one date. I think I fell in love with her that night. Vida grinned. What do you like about her? She's funny, and when we're together, things just flow. I know enough to know that's rare. I love her confidence, too. She has her head on her shoulders, and she makes me feel normal. Like I'm not, I don't know, the rich CEO of some company. She sounds very special. I hope things change for you, so that you can pursue her. The two finished up their meals and light-hearted banter. When the check arrived, Nasir scooped it up. I won't argue with that, Vida said, grinning. But I would like to meet up with you sometime again, just as friends. I'm new to the matchmaking thing too, and it would be nice to have a friend in the same boat. He nodded, handing his credit card to the waitress when she returned for the bill. I would like that. I'm glad to have met you. Once Nasir signed the check and left a generous tip, the two walked out of the diner into the dry, hot evening air. The sun sank orange toward the horizon, and though the light illuminated Vida like a brilliant angel, he couldn't see her as anything other than a sister figure. Get home safe. Nasir squeezed her arm, leaning in to kiss her cheek. Let me know when we can meet up again. I'll be sure to reserve the first hour for business-only talk. She laughed, waving over her shoulder as she walked away. Bye, Nasir. Have a good night. Nasir hopped into his car when the driver pulled up, directing the driver quickly before sinking into a pensive cloud in the back seat. He fiddled with his phone, toying with the idea of calling Cassandra. Admitting how he felt about her kicked up a lot of dust, proving that it had never cleared, simply settled into a subtle layer on the ground. He had to find some way to crack the shell. He opened their text message window and started typing. Cassandra, I'd like to see you. I can't stop thinking about you. Please let's meet again so we can chat. His finger hovered over the send button for a long time, and then he backspaced until the entire message was erased. That approach wouldn't work. It was unethical for him to hit on his matchmaker like that. He didn't want to get her in trouble, in case it was a work phone, so he tried again. I'd like to schedule a meeting with you. Please let me know when you're free. Simple and straightforward. He hit send before he could talk himself out of it. Pocketing the phone, he sent a prayer into the abyss of the atmosphere, asking for just one more chance with Cassandra. Chapter 10. Cassandra swiveled in her chair at the agency headquarters, staring blankly at her computer screen. She'd opted to work from the office today because Vida and Nasir were scheduled to meet for dinner. Without the inquisitive glances of her coworkers and boss, she might not be able to stay on track at home, and left to her own devices. Most Fridays, working from home wasn't a problem. But today, she'd had nerves as jumpy as a cat, mind sliding back to Nasir's date with a morbid curiosity, wishing these things could be live-streamed, just so she'd know. Did they hit it off? By 7 p.m., she wondered if his and Vida's date was taking the same turn hers had. Warming conversation, a surprise plate of oysters, and then a furtive dance of seduction. Sadness rippled through her. She wanted Nasir. But it was too late now. Between her job, the ethics, and the very sorry way she'd wrapped things up with him, there was no hope. The way he'd treated her at the meet and greet made it more than obvious. She'd ruined any chance with him, which should have been a relief, but instead, it was a puddle of regret. Her phone dinged with a new text message, and she scrambled to get it. Breath catching in her throat when she saw the message came from Nasir. Was he in her head somehow? Could he tell she'd be desperate to know about his date? I'd like to schedule a meeting with you. Please let me know when you're free. She sank into her office chair, letting the phone slip away. Vida. They must have matched perfectly. Or it had been a horrible match and he was ready to view more options. Hope sparked to life. She leaned forward to consult the planner splayed open on her desk and typed out a fast message. I have Monday evening free, or next Friday. Though what she really wanted to suggest was now. It would be wiser to give it some time. She could let the news of this pregnancy sink in and find her footing when it came to the future. Nasir's response came lightning fast. Monday. Where? Dinner? Anxiety made a bilious knot in her stomach. Or maybe that was just the pregnancy. His baby. She gnawed at the inside of her lip, debating her response. On the one hand, she'd love dinner with him again. On the other, where would it lead? Maybe something less formal. A few moments passed before he wrote back. There's a business bar near my building. We could meet there for a drink once we're both off. She grimaced, not with a growing baby inside her. No, I'm not sure I'm in the mood for drinks. Her phone was silent for a few more moments, and she could almost see him tapping his fingers on a desk somewhere, contemplating a suggestion. Let's do my apartment building. I'm tired of running around lately, to be honest. There's a meeting room there, so please don't read into it. She nodded, liking the way this idea settled into her. A perfect bridge between work and indulgence. She'd get to see him in his natural habitat, or close enough to it, and she could claim it was within bounds of a typical client follow-up. Sounds fine. What time? The following evening, when Cassandra packed up her things to head home for the weekend, she wished she'd made the meetup a bit sooner. Waiting until Monday would be agonizing. She wanted to see him now. Even if all she got to do was absorb that serious energy or bathe in the luxurious sweep of his gaze. Nasir was easily the most gorgeous man she'd laid eyes on, and for the briefest time, she'd felt like maybe they could fit together. That was before discovering the truth about what he wanted in life, so she should be glad for that knowledge, not mopey and regretful. They never would have even stood a chance together long term, and she'd do well to remember that. Nasir spent the whole weekend buried in work, the only recourse he had against impatience for Monday to arrive. By Sunday night, he couldn't sleep for anxiety, imagining what he might say to Cassandra, how he'd ease into relaxed conversation, practicing it all in front of a mirror as he got ready on Monday morning, as if he were a teenager again. Somewhere in the fits and starts of light sleep the night before, he decided to leave work early and prepare the penthouse for her arrival. A special touch. He'd promised the meeting room, but actually he'd make dinner for her. Himself. He fussed over his hair for a long time in the morning, working out the menu. When he strolled into the 10th floor of his office building that day, his secretary, Brenda, arched a brow. Good morning. She scrambled to her feet, scooping up a pile of papers at the corner of her desk. My, you look different this morning. He narrowed his eyes at her, receiving the stack of papers. Do I? She nodded, flushing. You look more handsome than usual. He sniffed, nodding. Good. He strode into his corner office, sunlight streaming in from both window-covered walls. It was toasty in there, just how he liked it, and he settled behind his desk to listen to voicemails. The first one was from Asim. His smooth tenor reverberated through the office on speakerphone. Hey, brother, call me when you can. I've got an update on the newest investor. Elena and Eleanor say hello. Well, Eleanor not really, because she's still learning, but you know what I mean. Nasir smiled, sad that the message ended, making way for something more business-oriented. He hadn't seen his first and only niece since she was 3 months old. The child changed and grew at an alarming rate. He'd have to work in a visit to Beirut very soon. Cassandra and Elena would get along so well. The thought shivered through him like a scandalous whisper. He and Cassandra might have had a sizzling connection, But it didn't mean he needed to start introducing her to the family, even though Mother already loved her. Nasir shifted in his seat, realizing he'd missed the entire second voicemail. He restarted it, leaning closer, like maybe the higher volume would drown out his thoughts. The monotonous voice of an executive from the Middle Eastern office rang through with some new complaints about Basiri. Nasir sighed, burying his face in his hand. His youngest brother was always dropping the ball, and he'd received that office simply because it was the easiest. Father had known his youngest brother wasn't cut from the same business cloth as the rest of them, which was precisely why he'd left the easiest branch to Basiri before he passed. The morning snowballed from there, small emergencies cropping up like ornery weeds, one after the other. By lunchtime, Nasir had smoothed over everything to the best extent possible, and he poked his head through his office door to look at Brenda. "Cancel my appointments for the afternoon. I'm taking the rest of the day off." Brenda's eyes widened, as if he'd suggested he was dissolving the company. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "I'm taking the rest of the day off." He paused. "And so should you." "Are you okay? Are you ill?" Nasir narrowed his eyes at her. "Why would you suggest that?" "Because you never take off work. Or let me go early, for that matter." Nasir smiled briefly. "Well, enjoy it. I'll see you back here tomorrow morning." He strode back into his office to collect his phone and briefcase before locking up for the day. His hand stilled over the phone, realizing the salmon and potatoes dinner he'd been planning would be impossible without groceries. His pantry was a desert. He snatched up the device, swiping to the personal grocer app, scrolling through the options. "You know," Brenda's voice cut through his online grocery shopping. He swiveled to face her. "Whatever made you look more handsome today, you should keep it up." She winked at him. "Sounds like maybe you've got something good going in your off time." He grinned, and she gave him a little side-eye at the unusual expression. "Just trying to reach that work-life balance they've been talking about for years." Brenda waved at him, slinging her purse over her shoulder. "I hope you find it. See you tomorrow." Nasir made quick work of submitting the grocery request. The app estimated a delivery time in just a few hours, enough time for him to get home and get things ready for her arrival. It was perfectly natural to want to receive a business meeting with a fresh-cooked meal at a well-prepared penthouse. He had to be careful to toe the line between business and personal, not to overstep her boundaries, but also to make it plain that he desperately wanted this to become personal again. Back at his penthouse, Nasir took a shower and changed into more comfortable slacks, on the side of business casual, and a polo shirt, making sure the top buttons hung open. He spritzed on his favorite cologne, taking the extra time in front of the mirror again, and then assessed the penthouse from the farthest corner. While the decor was cutting edge, jagged black swipes of paint framed by repurposed steel pipes, everything illuminated by industrial chic lighting. The place was decidedly lived in. His maid only came once a week anymore to tidy up and clean the bathrooms, since he was here so infrequently. The couch was a mess of pillows and scattered papers. Folders and coffee mugs completely consumed the coffee table, which was a cross-section of an enormous tree trunk, rescued from a Northern California wood chip processing company and shellacked. Nasir liked his home space to be an interesting and tidy reflection of himself, somewhere between upscale hotel and primly organized boardroom. But looking at it now, he couldn't imagine what Cassandra might think of it all. If it would entice her, or maybe be so foreign and strange that it became unappealing. He should probably do something about the clutter, though. The front door jiggled and then opened. He turned with a creased brow to demand who would enter his apartment so brazenly until he saw his maid, Nilda, step through. He relaxed. It had been so long since they'd run into each other at his penthouse. He forgot she came on Mondays around noon. "What a surprise!" Nilda beamed at him, shutting the door behind her. Or maybe there's bad news if you're home from work so early. I hope it's nothing bad. He went over to her, pressing a quick kiss to her cheek. Nothing bad, I promise you. I'm actually here to prepare for a dinner. Nilda arched an eyebrow, setting her purse on a chair in the foyer. What sort of dinner requires this much preparation? He blinked. Well, I'll be cooking it. Her eyes widened. You cook? Yes, of course. He went back to the living area, collecting the scattered folders. My mother taught me. I used to be at her side constantly in the kitchen. Nilda chuckled, heading for a closet door where the majority of the cleaning supplies were kept. I can just see that. You at Sophia's side. Sophia had been around enough to get to know Nilda quite well. The two had a fondness for each other. Always the mama's boy. Nasir laughed, taking his coffee mugs to the sink. It served me well. I know how to use a knife and make tabbouleh. What more could a woman ask for in a man? Ah. Nilda clucked her tongue, bringing the mop bucket into the kitchen to fill at the sink. So this isn't a business dinner tonight. You're wooing a woman. Nasir stilled his tongue, wondering what he should even say about the dinner that night. I invited the first woman I've fallen for in years to my house under the ruse of a business meeting. Something like that. Nilda winked. If you need my help with dinner, just let me know. You'll know where to find me. And then I'll be out of your hair before she gets here. Chapter 11. Cassandra stepped through the sliding door of the sleek apartment building, gripping her briefcase so hard her knuckles turned white. Her belly had been churning for a full 3 hours now, though she couldn't tell if it was from the early pregnancy symptoms or the sheer anticipation of seeing Nasir. She headed for the main desk, intent on having someone ring Nasir to inform him of her arrival, but the elevator doors swept open, and he stepped out. Nasir strode toward her, hands buried in the pockets of his slate-gray slacks. His black hair gelled and styled so well that her mouth hung open. A small smile crested his face, time shuddering to a stop as she absorbed him, his model-worthy saunter, the loose linen shirt, the way his dark eyes swept over her as if this was much more than a business meeting. She blinked, tilting her head to look up at him once he was in front of her. There you are. Here I am. His grin widened. Shall we? He jerked his head toward the elevator, and she stumbled after him, wishing he'd offered a handshake or a hug or something. Anything to touch that caramel skin, feel the desire thrumming inside him, the way it was inside her. Her legs felt wobbly as she followed him into the elevator, pure steel and mirrors. Once the doors slid shut, their tight quarters bore down on her. She struggled to think of something light to say, something platonic, something that didn't betray the wild pulse urging her to press him against the wall and kiss him until her lips went numb. This is a nice change of scenery for a business meeting. She smiled tightly, trying not to look at his profile for too long. That immaculate, chiseled profile. I get tired of running all around, too. The meeting room I mentioned is unfortunately in use this evening, Nasir said, glancing over at her. I've set us up in my apartment instead. I hope that isn't a problem. Her voice shriveled in her throat. Great. Right into the lion's den. Not a problem at all. Now she could fulfill that desperate desire to see where he lived, what he surrounded himself with, without even needing to ask for it. She stared at the ascending numbers on the elevator, squeezing her briefcase handle over and over again. The numbers changed to Penthouse on the LCD screen, and the doors slid open quietly. He gestured before him. After you. She stepped into a small foyer, her heart beginning a wild beat. He unlocked the front door and pushed it open, welcoming her inside. Come in, please. Make yourself at home. He dropped the keys into a small bowl on a table by the door, then slipped off his shoes before venturing further. Before her, The 2017 winner of the Most Spectacular Apartment Award from Interior Design magazine beckoned for her to come inside. And if it wasn't the winner, it should have been. Her mouth fell open again and she clamped it shut, slipping out of her heels as she tried to take it all in without gawking and squealing. Nasir glanced over his shoulder, waving for her to follow. "Come in here. I prepared a little dinner, if you're hungry." She stumbled after him, notes of pepper and lemon wafting through the air. Soft jazz played from somewhere, maybe it was imbued in the air itself, and she followed him into an expansive kitchen, decked out with shiny stainless appliances, all the countertops swirling gray marble. "Your place is lovely." She blinked a few times as he bent over to pull something out of the oven. Lovely was an understatement. Nasir could write the book on being the refined gentleman. "I had no idea you cooked." "Why would you?" He set the tray down on top of the stove, pulling lobster-shaped oven mitts off his hands. "I only ever took you to a restaurant." The brazen reference to their dating history rang like an insult in the air. It violated the secret pact in her head that they'd both avoid talking about that amazing date and everything that came after it, under threat of death. She cleared her throat, nodding slowly. "True." Nasir offered up a small grin but seemed unruffled by the implications of his reference. "Go sit down. I'll bring a plate out to you. You do want to eat, right?" She eyed the bulging foil packets, desperate to know what emitted such tantalizing smells. "Yeah, sure. I haven't eaten yet." He nodded, jerking his head toward the room beyond the kitchen. "The dining room is that way. I'll meet you there. Just give me a minute to plate these up." She meandered out of the kitchen, taking her time to absorb more details. The exotic potted plants with white blooms that drooped like a melodramatic actress. The smooth flooring that looked neither wood nor tile, but some strange, modern in-between. And the wide wall of windows that overlooked Los Angeles, all the way to the ocean, showcasing a spectacular burning sunset that on any other evening she'd have to drive 3 hours to see. Holy shit! She drifted toward the windows, dragging a finger over the long black table, which was set for two. An unopened bottle of wine sat on the table, and it was that detail that made her realize he'd prepared this for her. The whole thing. None of it was casual or happenstance, like he might want her to believe. She gazed at the breathtaking panorama, relishing the lick of satisfaction through her veins. Nasir still wanted her, and damn, that felt nice. But what could she even do about it, other than drink up the adoration like a thirsty tourist? Nasir came into the dining area a moment later, holding a tray with a proud smile. "Sit, Cassandra." She did as she was told, sliding into the seat facing the windows. He set a large black square plate in front of her, a fillet of salmon, steamed slightly, flanked by asparagus spears and roasted potatoes. Her eyebrows shot up. "Wow, this looks amazing." He eased into his own seat and reached for the wine. "I hope you like it." He uncorked the bottle and poured a healthy portion into each of their waiting glasses. He raised his glass, which meant she had to do the same. Panic streaked through her. "To the future." He clinked glasses and took a smiling sip. She returned the smile nervously, bringing the glass to her lips, the pungent smell of wine almost making her queasy. She took the tiniest sip possible, barely enough to coat her mouth, and set it down. What a nice red." No way could she mention she wasn't drinking anymore and wouldn't be for the next 9 months. Nasir cut into his salmon, eyes sparkling like he knew a secret. "So, how was your weekend?" "Pretty uneventful. Laid around my apartment thinking about you. Mostly work, a couple movies. What about you?" "Same." He spared an asparagus stalk, crunching into it. You watch movies? She arched a brow. This seemed highly unlikely. The man basically ate and pissed work, from what she knew of him. Sometimes, he shrugged. When I want to. Cassandra took a bite of the salmon, the juicy flesh immediately dissolving into her mouth. She moaned low, then caught herself, looking at him with wide eyes. She finished chewing, flavors coating her mouth. Damn, Nasir, that is so good. That same sly grin appeared as he reached for his wineglass. Glad you like it. You'll have to tell me your recipe. Oh, no. He shook his head, then took a big sip of wine. The recipe only gets shared with blood or marriage ties. She sighed dramatically, unable to stop the words from blasting out of her mouth. So I have to marry you to get it? He shrugged. It's one way. She narrowed her eyes at him as she ate another bite. You should have put this skill set into your profile. Maybe so, but it's important to leave some surprises, no? He winked, and it made her entire face heat up. She stabbed a roasted potato, stuffing the whole thing in her mouth, as if the mouthful might cover up her visible reaction. Besides, Vida would have appreciated it, but it wouldn't have changed anything, Nasir went on. The mention of his first date made her belly twist, and she straightened in her seat, dabbing at her mouth with a napkin. This was a business meeting, after all. She was doing a poor job of keeping it on track. That's true. She swirled the wine in her glass by the stem, the dark violet-red liquid creating a mesmerizing cyclone. But what did you like about her? Nasir chewed, squinting over her shoulder. She was very professional, very articulate. Cassandra nodded. More proof that he just wanted another CEO to marry. Those are great qualities. Maybe we could look at the other matches after dinner. He paused, as if he wanted to say more, but nothing followed. Absolutely. Disappointment crashed through her. Maybe the dinner had truly been for her, but not in the way she'd hoped for. And the snuffing of that excitement, that thrilling, consuming knowledge, felt like a bigger kick in the gut than anything else. I've actually gone ahead and organized the remaining selections based on a few different criteria. She cut a potato into tiny pieces, while Nasir filled his second glass of wine. That way we can see who are the strongest finishers across the board, and then who ranks highest based on specific areas. Sounds great. He stuffed more salmon into his mouth, his eyes illuminated by the blaze of the reflected sunset. The dinner flew by, and Cassandra tried as hard as she could to savor the flavors, the beautiful surroundings, the natural comfort of Nasir at her side, even when talking business. When their plates were clean and Nasir was draining the wine bottle, Cassandra stood. I should get my briefcase, she said, feeling woozy, as if she'd had her share of wine, even though her glass still sat full. Probably just the effect of Nasir's electric gaze. Or you could tell me you don't want to see the other options. She hesitated, giving him a chance to tell her to sit her ass down and kiss him. Sure, I'll wait here. Nasir fingered the stem of his wineglass. Disappointment slunk through her, furtive and fast, and she tried to rationalize it away. She could never be with a client, and certainly not the client whose child she carried. Be rational about this. But it was hard to be rational around Nasir. Back in the safety of her apartment, it was easy to stick to the idea that she and Nasir could never work. When it stared at her in black and white, it felt solid and true, like a math equation. But in here, in his penthouse, bathed in Nasir's energy and his sultry glances, the whole thing crumbled, like the inclusion of the imaginary numbers and calculus that she'd never truly understood. Cassandra retrieved her briefcase and hurried back, slowing at the sight of him. He sat bathed in vibrant orange hues, his gaze waiting for hers, his casual posture, this man in his element. knocking her off balance for a moment. Be strong. She went back to her seat, opening up the briefcase on the table, pulling out the stack of papers she'd prepared. Nasir's gaze burned on her, practically leaving scars in its wake. Before you show me anyone else, he said, sitting straight, pushing his wineglass away. Just tell me one thing. The shift in his tone made her skin prickle. What's that? He slid his hand over the table, clasping her wrist. Electricity jolted through her, and she gasped. That night we had together was good, wasn't it? Her gaze fell to his wrist, the jutting of his wrist bone, the sexy dark hairs covering his forearm as if he'd brushed them individually. Finally. Nasir, Just tell me. He pushed back from the table, pulling her up to standing with him. His hands gripped the sides of her arms, his dark eyes imploring. I don't want you to lie to me. It's important to me. Cassandra gulped, looking into his earnest face, a sigh of relief cascading through her. So the business meeting had been a ruse. Whatever this imaginary number was in their math equation, it was there for him too. It was fucking incredible. He exhaled, like he'd stopped breathing waiting for her to say that, and then his hands moved to cup her face. The heat of him seared through her, making her eyes flutter shut, and then his lips were against hers, luxuriously soft and warm. She inhaled sharply, clutching at his shoulders, pressing herself against him. He deepened the kiss, tongue pressing into her mouth. She moaned and welcomed it, loving the languorous exploration, the soft bath of his scent, the heat that poured from him. This isn't the wine talking, he added after a few kisses, voice breathy against her cheek. You should know that. She smoothed her hands over his chest, giggling. Well, what would the wine say if it could talk? It would say, take this woman to your bedroom immediately. He dragged his lips over her forearm, squeezed her arms, his fingertips drifting down to her hands. Which I intend to do. Cassandra hooked her arms around his neck, laughing as he swept her up into his arms. You have a thing for sweeping a lady off her feet. Like I said, best to leave some surprises. His boyish grin made her weak, so she clung tighter to him, burying her face in his neck. This was so wrong, but it was also so right. To hell with the consequences. She wanted this man, and he wanted her. This would be the last time, and she deserved one more time with him. She'd figure out the rest later. For now, she just needed Nasir. Chapter 12. The weight of Cassandra in his arms sated him in a way that felt like the punctuation of a sentence. There was no other woman he wanted in his arms. There was no other woman who'd ever felt like this against him. He cinched her tighter, gaze sweeping over her playful smirk, glossy blonde hair, the look in her eyes that told him this wasn't just his imagination. Why are you so beautiful? He stopped mid-stride to the bedroom, admiring her as if it were the first time all over again. I suppose I can try to be less beautiful, she said breathily. You'll fail, he warned, dotting her jawline with kisses. I can guarantee it. He turned and headed back to the dining room, a new idea gripping him. Where are we going now? She cupped his face, parting her lips for him, receiving his urgent kiss with grace. Phase 2 of my surprise. He set her down on the edge of the dining room table, the sunlight showering her in ethereal light. Yes, this was where he'd have her, right where she'd shone like a goddess. You want to do it here? She lifted a brow, looking back at the expanse of dining room table behind her. I didn't take you for a dinner table kind of guy. I'm not, he admitted, tugging her low-cut shirt out of her work slacks. But you make me want to be. She sighed. Let me see you.
Sorry, readers. Here's where we fade to black due to YouTube explicit content guidelines. If you dream for the steam, you'll need to take a look in the book.
Nasir pulled his briefs on and then his pants. As he fastened them, the silence between them became deafening. Cassandra, why don't you spend the... I should go. They both spoke at the same time. Nasir sighed tersely. Why do you want to leave? This was inappropriate. She shook her head, nostrils flaring. I'm a little upset with myself, so I should go. Upset with yourself? He reached for her, but she dodged him. Cassandra, this was both of us. I wish you wouldn't feel badly about what happened. It's natural and inevitable. Exactly, which is why I shouldn't be working with you anymore. She tucked her shirt into her work pants, her mouth a thin line. If this gets out, it will ruin my career, and apparently I can't help myself, so something needs to change. Nasir wasn't sure whether to be flattered or concerned. This won't get out, I promise. I have no interest in ruining your career. Her nostrils flared. Thank you. I believe that. Why don't you stay the night? Her gaze swung to meet his, prickly and intense. Are you serious? Nasir straightened. Of course. We were having a lovely evening. Yes, a lovely work evening. She sighed, gathering her papers from the table. What do you want from me? The question landed like a spear in the gut. It wasn't a simple question, but rather rimmed with barbed wire. If he told her what he really wanted from her, she'd shoot out the door faster than a bullet. I want to be with you. It feels right. He had to answer carefully, to strategize. What was the simplest, the most honest yet soothing? I'd like to spend more time with you. That's the one thing I shouldn't do. He ran a hand through his hair, her tone sawing at his patience. Well, what do you want from me? She cleared her throat as she packed up her briefcase. I want you to respect my career. Silence settled between them, heavy like a dense fog. He had nowhere to go from here. If that was how she wanted things, then he had to respect that. He'd barely found the time to go on an arranged date due to his own commitment to his career. If Cassandra was cut from that same cloth, he had to respect it. I would never do anything to ruin it, he said in a soft voice, turning away from her. But what about us? The question hung in the back of his throat, bulky and foreign, with no way to speak the words. I'll send you the information about the lunch dates, Cassandra said a few moments later, her voice quiet and calm. She headed toward the door and he slunk down the hall behind her, his limbs a confusing mess of post-coital body buzz and disappointment. Nasir didn't say anything, just held the door open as she slipped into her heels and then strode out of the penthouse. He watched her get on the elevator, hoping she might glance at him, waiting for even a scorching millisecond of recognition or doubt or regret. Cassandra kept her lips pursed and eyes on the ground, the elevator doors sliding shut, removing her from his life. Chapter 13. Cassandra sighed, tugging the waistband of her leggings up over her belly bulge for the 100th time that morning. She'd been working from home almost exclusively the past couple weeks, once she realized her belly had bulged into definitely baby and was no longer questionable bloating. She wasn't ready to tell coworkers, not even Laura. As far as she could see, she had two options available to her: the truth, which would jeopardize her career and involve a lot of explanation she wasn't ready to give, or acting like she had no idea, which somehow seemed worse, like maybe she participated in some sort of secret sexual underworld nobody knew about. So remote work it was, until she could muster the courage to ask for Laura's advice. She, at least, would keep her secret long enough to help her figure out the smart career move. Keeping this information from her boss was key, though. This slip-up couldn't follow her if she needed to switch agencies. As if she could sense her thoughts, Laura sent a message using their work messaging client. "Hey girl, you around? I need some advice." Cassandra clucked her tongue. "Funny, I was thinking the same about you." She typed back a quick response. "I'm here and ready. What is it?" "The file you passed me a few months ago. Do you remember? The Middle Eastern guy, Nasir? He's 10 matches deep and still no dice." Cassandra's hand went to her belly as she read the message. She couldn't fight the smile that crossed her face. Was it wrong to feel a little bit happy about that, even though they would have never worked out? She hadn't even seen him for months. Man, some guys are just impossible to please. You're telling me, but get this, threw me a curveball earlier this week. He updated his profile, but it's completely different. It's like a whole new guy, I swear to God. Cassandra furrowed a brow, rereading her words a few times. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she wrote back. Seriously? That's so odd. Just out of curiosity, could I see it? For informational purposes, of course. I've never had something like this happen. Would like to see what he changed. She nibbled on a nail, awaiting Laura's response. Peeking at other agents' profiles was a big no-no, but maybe it would slide since Nasir had technically been her client for a while. Totally. You worked with him before, so maybe you can explain this change. I certainly don't get it. Would love any insight. I feel like I should charge him double, LOL. Her email client dinged with a new arrival, and she flipped over to the program, mouse hovering over the message. What would be in there? People never changed their profiles to the extent Laura alluded to. It just didn't make sense. Her cell phone rang, short, annoying beeps that meant her alarm was going off. She grabbed it. A reminder waiting on the screen. Appointment with gyno. She inhaled sharply, springing up from the couch. She'd forgotten entirely, and she still had to get across town. If she called a rideshare immediately, she'd probably make it, but only by the skin of her teeth. This was an important appointment, too, one she'd rescheduled twice now simply due to anxiety, the first ultrasound. After she'd called for the ride, Cassandra rushed to gather her purse and a novel and bolted out of the apartment. The taxi showed up within minutes, one of the pluses of big city life immediately tempered by the half-hour drive to make it only 2.5 miles. Fueled by nervous energy and the need for distraction, she finished 3 chapters of her book before the taxi pulled up at the doctor's office. She hurried toward the front door, tugging her leggings up over her belly yet again. Inside the doctor's office, she sat on the edge of the examining table, swinging her legs as she waited for the nurse to finish her preparations. The room was quiet and dim, a hushed reverence, making her feel a bit like she had in church as a young girl. The nurse didn't speak as she pulled over the ultrasound machine and readied various tubes at the bedside. Finally, she said in a brusque voice, "Lie back." Cassandra did as she was told, the paper crinkling beneath her as she relaxed onto the examining table. The nurse pushed her shirt up, and the machine flickered to life. Cassandra watched every movement from the nurse, as if she were at a bar and suspected someone of tampering with her drink. She swallowed hard. Calm down. Nothing is afoot here. She's just doing her job. Cassandra's right hand twitched, and she desperately wanted to squeeze someone's hand. Even more than that, she wanted it to be Nasir's. She pinched her eyes shut, bringing a hand to cover them. A tear escaped, which seemed like it was probably pregnancy hormones, but also she'd missed him something fierce in the months since she ingloriously exited his life. No amount of rationality or logic could really explain this longing anymore. Someone rapped on the door, and then her doctor peeked her head in, a shock of frizzy brown hair surprising her as it always did. The obstetrician stepped inside, shutting the door quietly behind her. "Cassandra." She offered a hand as she approached. "So it's time for the ultrasound." "Looks like it." Cassandra managed to laugh a little, but it was forced. The ultrasound meant there were a whole lot of other things coming down the pipeline. and she wasn't ready to face a single damn one of them. "It's about time," the doctor said, easing onto a rolling stool. She picked up a small wand, squeezing gel onto it. "You shouldn't have waited so long." Cassandra sighed, eyes on the screen, like maybe it would show something before the wand even touched her. I know. I just got busy with work." The doctor seared her with a look. "But I'm here now, so let's just see what's happening in there." Dr. Berna pressed the wand to Cassandra's lower belly, the cool gel making her suck in a sharp breath. She rubbed it around in a few sweeping circles, squinting at the screen. "Do you have a partner, or are you with the father?" Dr. Berna asked it like it was the most casual thing in the world. Cassandra grimaced as the cool gel traveled lower. She had no good answer to that question. Hell, even her fibs sounded pathetic. "He was busy today, unfortunately," Cassandra said, deciding at the last minute that both two-night stand gone wrong and fatally mismatched sex god were inappropriate for the quiet sternness of this appointment. Dr. Berna nodded, clucking her tongue. "There we go. Gotcha." Cassandra watched the screen, trying to make sense of the whirls of white against the black background. Maybe she could tell people she'd been artificially inseminated, like she'd gone to a clinic, and this was an implant. That way, she had no spouse to account for. She was simply a goal-oriented young woman who got what she wanted, no partner required. She made enough money. Maybe it would pass as truth. "Here we are," Dr. Berna smiled, pointing to the screen where a couple strange blobs floated. It looked like a newt, or maybe a collection of snails. Cassandra's mouth hung open, unsure what to say, feeling guilty that she couldn't identify her baby on the screen. "What is it, a boy or a girl?" Dr. Berna smiled wider, moving the wand a little bit lower, and then she pointed again at the screen, pointing out a few distinct areas so that finally, Cassandra could see. She gasped, understanding the precious outlines, the collection of whorls, the ways in which the final pieces came together to create something very undeniably real. Chapter 14. Nasir stepped out of his car, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt as he strode toward an upscale cafe in the business district for his lunch date. As soon as he stepped inside, a familiar voice called for him. "Nasir, yoo-hoo, over here!" Vida wiggled her fingers at him from over a few heads, her bright smile hooking him. He went toward her, catching her in a hug, pressing a quick kiss to her cheek. "So good to see you again, Vida." He squeezed her shoulder, refreshing his memory of her features. They saw each other so infrequently, he always seemed to notice something new about her that he hadn't caught the previous time. And today, she had a certain glow, something that vibrated in a quiet field around her. "Let's go to our table." She tugged at his wrist, guiding him to a small round table set for two, pressed up against a large bay window. 2 glasses of water already waited for them. "You're even more punctual than usual," Nasir commented, unfolding his napkin over his lap. "What's the news?" "How can you tell that I have some?" Vida winked, sipping at her water. "You're positively radiant. Now share." "I've met someone." She leaned over the table, wiggling her eyebrows. "The matchmaking services work." Nasir's eyes widened. "Really? You've finally found that elusive perfect man?" Vida nodded, slapping her palm against her menu. "And do you know what, Nasir? He's not even a businessman." Nasir almost choked on his water. Now that seemed terribly unlikely, from what he knew of Vida. "You've got to be kidding me. I thought this guy would have been the CEO of Google or something." She shook her head, eyes glinting with mischief. "Nope. He's a college professor. His name is Oscar. He's so sensitive and funny and—" She trailed off into a sigh. "I think I already love him." Nasir smiled wanly. Yeah, he knew that feeling. It must be nice to be able to relish it, instead of having the other person storm away and act as if passion were the plague. A waiter approached to take their order. Nasir ordered the first thing he saw, a barbecue chicken Cobb salad, and passed off his menu. "I'm happy for you, Vida." He reached out to squeeze her wrist. She patted the top of his hand, some of the joy ebbing from her face. "Now what about you?" She sat back into her seat, her tone reminding him of the kind he used in board meetings to move to the next agenda point. "Any luck at all?" "I've been on 10 dates," Nasir confessed, rubbing his thumb over the bright, polished handle of his spoon. "No luck." Vida creased a brow. "Not even a little bit of maybe?" "There's just no spark. They're all fine women, but it hasn't been the same as that one woman you told me about?" Nasir nodded, unable to meet her gaze. The whole thing sounded even stupider than it felt on the inside. Couldn't he give up Cassandra's ghost by now? "Right. Her." "Nasir." Vida's sharp tone made him jerk his gaze up to meet hers. "May I share something with you?" "Of course." "We're talking about the person you might very well spend the rest of your life with." Vida pursed her lips. "Why keep trying if you've already found her?" "Well, she doesn't want me, so I have to keep trying." Furthermore, his genius idea to resubmit his profile in the matchmaking system seemed to have resulted in a dead end. All it got him was a confused call from his new matchmaker, wondering if he was still happy with their services. He wanted to scream at her, "Doesn't this profile describe someone you work with?" "Does she really not want you? Or have you just not tried hard enough?" Vida cocked a brow, a knowing smile emerging. "I've gotten to know you in these couple of months we've been getting lunch together. You made it sound like a professional issue kept you two apart. But is that really such a big deal when we're talking about true love?" Nasir cleared his throat. "I never said I was in love with anyone." "You didn't need to. It's love when you can't move on from a girl even after trying for months." Vida looked extremely pleased with herself. "Well, I can't do anything about it. The professional issue is still at play. I've tried to be subtle, but—" "Screw subtle," Vida said, flicking her hand in the air, as if brushing away that disgusting word. "Women don't want subtle. She's not part of a negotiation in a boardroom." She leaned forward, voice lowering. "Tell me who this woman is." A grin flickered at Nasir's lips. "Why?" "I have to know. The professional part makes me curious. Is she your secretary?" Nasir shook his head. "No, I don't work with her." Vida's eyes widened. "Then what sort of professional obstacle could there be?" He sighed. "It's different." He struggled with a way to reveal her identity without saying her name. "Come on, tell me." He crumbled. "It's one of the matchmakers at the agency." Vida gasped, and then giggled a little. "Which one?" "Cassandra." He stared across the restaurant, clenching and unclenching his fists under the table. Vida let out a low whistle, one that made his stomach drop. "Well, I can see why that would be a problem for you." Defensiveness licked through him. He narrowed his eyes. "Why?" "Falling in love with a woman who's expecting," Vida said, as though this was the most natural thing in the world. She leaned back in her chair, signaling for a waiter, while the news settled inside him, gathering into strange clumps that bobbed and bothered him. "What do you mean, expecting?" The word felt funny on his tongue. "Expecting a baby." She smiled as a waiter approached and ordered 2 glasses of Pinot Grigio. To Nasir, she said, "We should have some wine." Nasir swallowed a sick taste in his mouth, staring at the tablecloth like maybe there was an answer somewhere in the linen. "I haven't seen her in a couple of months," he finally forced out. I had no idea." "She's been matching me. She helped me find my Oscar." She smiled sweetly. "She definitely has a baby on the way. However, I don't think you should let that deter you. She's not married. Maybe she just had, I don't know, a visit at the sperm bank?" "I assume you mean metaphorically," he said, receiving the glass of wine from the waiter. "No, I mean literally. Maybe she got pregnant the scientific way, visiting a sperm bank and picking the best candidate." He gave a terse sigh. It might be better than the alternative, which was that she had a boyfriend whose child she was carrying, and he had no idea. "I doubt that." Vida got quiet, sipping at her wine with narrowed eyes sizzling on him. "Why?" He shook his head. Best not to go down that route. "No reason." Vida stuck her tongue into the side of her cheek, eyeing him. "No reason, huh? Did you two sleep together?" Nasir studied the far wall of the restaurant, trying to keep his expression cool, collected. "Does it matter?" She grinned like a devil. "You did." "So?" The silence stretched long and taut between them, his heart pounding in his ears. Vida shrugged, eyes glinting like she'd just cracked the code. "Maybe it's yours." The words thundered through him, fire-hot and electric, reaching all the way to his bone marrow with the secret whisper, "That's what it is." He riveted his gaze on Vida, his voice drying to nothing. Cassandra was pregnant, and it was either his or it wasn't. But in order to find out, he had to do the thing he'd been sidestepping for months: cause a scene, declare himself, make sure he broke down whatever barrier it was that kept her from following what felt right, risk upsetting Cassandra, or even making her hate him. Because Vida was right. Screw being subtle. If Cassandra was pregnant with his child, then he had to work not only fast, but creatively. Chapter 15. Cassandra wasn't even 15 minutes into her Wednesday morning, barely out of the shower, before her work email dinged with a new arrival. She wrapped a towel around her body, using another to pat her hair dry, as she checked out her laptop screen from behind the couch. New email. Nasir Azhar. She gasped, leaning closer to reread it, to make sure it wasn't a mistake. Why would Nasir be emailing her? Her heart raced as she scooted around the couch to open the message, nearly breathless as she waited for it to pop up. "Dear Cassandra, I'm writing to let you know that I think I've found the one. Yes, at last. I would like to extend a formal invitation to meet with you for lunch or dinner to celebrate the good news. Your colleagues at the agency told me this was customary, and I am absolutely one to uphold customs. Please allow me one last appointment to personally thank you for your time and assistance in this grand endeavor. I could not be more grateful for your input and insight in the early stages. Please respond at your earliest convenience with your availability. Regards, Nasir." Cassandra's heart thudded like a bass drum between her ears. She blinked a few times, letting the sad news sink in, questions and doubts springing to life, like dandelions in bloom. Who could it have been? Laura didn't mention a successful match since his new profile. You never even looked at the profile. Nasir is officially gone. She blinked out a tear, wiping it away before it could crest her cheek, and clicked reply. The blank email stared at her, urging her to respond. But what could she say? Meeting up with him was practically impossible. If she met with him, he'd see that she was pregnant. And if he saw that, she'd have to explain something. Maybe not that he was the father, but some story, the one she just couldn't come up with. Turning him down was akin to poor customer service, especially if he'd already contacted her higher-ups about proper protocol. Maybe she could reschedule the thank you dinner in 6 months. After she'd given birth and her belly was back to normal proportions? Ridiculous. But maybe there was still a way out. She grabbed for her phone, dialing Laura's work number. Laura picked up on the second ring. "Morning, early bird." "Same to you." She was already breathless. "Hey, can I ask you a favor?" "What?" Will you attend a thank you dinner in my place for a former client? Laura's end was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, she sounded suspicious. Who is it, and why? Cassandra grimaced. Nasir Azhar. Laura groaned. No way! You've got to be kidding me. I can't attend in your place, because I'm also scheduled for one with him. I can't show up to that and say, oh, by the way, this counts for both of us. Cassandra sighed, letting her eyes flutter shut. You're right. What's the big deal anyway? You love these thank you dinners. Just go. I can't. Why? Cassandra nibbled at the inside of her cheek, debating how much longer she could really go on hiding the truth. I'm pregnant. Laura gasped. You are? That's so exciting! Cassandra smiled briefly. Thanks. Congratulations, girl! Oh my gosh, when are you due? And who's the father? When did you find out? Are you going to have a baby shower? What about finding out the sex? Will you do that too? Cassandra grimaced, bringing a hand to her belly. Laura, I promise I will answer all of these questions for you. But first, just tell me, as a friend, please meet with Nasir in my place. Why would Nasir care if you're pregnant? Cassandra stayed quiet, struggling to find an answer that might be even halfway believable. Listen, have you taken a look at that new profile I sent you a few days ago? Cassandra wilted, thankful she'd chosen to sit down for this conversation. No, I haven't. Why? Look at it. Now! Cassandra pushed herself up, barely able to maneuver the mouse to the appropriate email. Everything blurred before her eyes. How had she gotten into this mess? Everything would have been fine if she'd just not gone to that damn wedding. Okay, opening it now. She clicked through the download process, Laura's soft hum the only thing she could hear over the throbbing of her heart. When the new profile sprang open on the screen, Cassandra scanned it quickly, desperate to find what made it so relevant suddenly, eyes careening without really taking anything in. Do you see? Laura asked. Cassandra tutted, scrolling further. He'd modified his preferences for hobbies, work ethic, religion, and interests. Toward the bottom, she glanced at the physical attributes section, was just about to open her mouth when she noticed a few potential match profiles attached. All of them were blonde-haired, blue-eyed cuties who looked strangely similar to her. Cassandra's mouth fell open. Okay. Now, are you pregnant with Nasir's baby? Cassandra pinched her eyes shut. It was now or never. Yes. Laura squealed. Oh my God, your kids are going to be so cute! Don't say that. I can't. I'm not sure I should say. If you're pregnant with his kid, you have to say something, Laura interjected. But it will just derail his life. And mine, Cassandra said, flipping through the pictures of the potential matches again. There was no mistaking it. Nasir had revised his profile in a huge way. The last thing I want to do is be in a loveless relationship only because there's a kid involved. That's no way to live a life. My parents tried it, and trust me, I can tell you it doesn't work. Not even a little bit. Laura sighed. Right, but it's not fair if you don't even try. Why would I try? Laura tutted. Did you even look at the profile? I'm a little worked up right now, she said, tucking her legs under her. It's hard for me to focus. I get it, but listen, this is an opportunity more than anything. You haven't even tried it with Nasir to know it won't work. So why don't you just give it a shot? Trying it doesn't mean forever. You already know what doesn't work. Why would you sacrifice the chance of a happy family? Fine, let's say I do take that risk. Then I'll lose my job. Cassandra's throat tightened with the arrival of tears. Laura paused. You're right. And time will tell how that plays out. But come on. Between the two, happy family or a job, is there even a choice? Cassandra wiped away another tear that spilled. I want a happy family. I really do. But if I risk the job, and then also don't get the happy family—" Her voice came out a whisper. "Where does that leave me?" Laura let out a small noise of sympathy. "Oh, honey. I think it's smarter to cut my losses, keep the job, and just get over the rest. Get over him." Her throat tightened again. "But that's no way to live," Laura warned. "You're so afraid of reliving your parents' misery, you're pushing yourself to a new extreme. Listen, I'll back you up no matter what happens. When it breaks that you hooked up with a client, which, I mean, we both know it will, I will do everything I can to defend you and make sure this goes down well. But I just can't watch you throw away this chance for— what? Because you let fear rule your decisions?" Cassandra nodded, wiping away more tears. "I know." "At least tell him the baby is his," Laura insisted. "He deserves to know, and your baby deserves his support." Cassandra leaned her head against the back of the couch, letting the idea meander through her mind, like a foreign exchange student seeing LA for the first time. "I'll think about it." Laura huffed. "Fine, but call me later so we can talk about the baby more. I'm here for anything you need, and I'm not covering you for this dinner. I say that because I love you." Cassandra hung up the phone, vision hazy through the tears. Her limbs were leaden and dull, and all she wanted was to curl into a ball on the couch and cry until some of the ache dissipated. And more than that, she wanted Nasir to come to her, to hold her like she imagined he would, full of tenderness and strong arms and reassuring words. She'd been imagining every facet of him as a partner and lover since the day she stormed out of his apartment. It seemed that every centimeter her belly grew, so did her desire for the father. She sniffed hard, wiping away the tears, sitting up so she could scroll through her work emails. At Nasir's email, she hit reply before she could think better of it, and typed the first thing that came to mind. "Thank you for the invitation. Can we do tonight at 7:30? She sent it before she could change a single thing, and then crumpled back onto the couch, hugging her knees to her body, trying to keep the excitement inside her from turning into fear. Chapter 16. Cassandra fiddled with the fabric of her flowy dress in the back seat of the rideshare. She'd stressed over this choice for what felt like hours, hemming and hawing between something that hid her bulging belly or something that accentuated it. Because what if she didn't find the courage to admit it to him? She might very well chicken out. So she'd chosen flowy. She gnawed at her lip as the car slowed in front of a low storefront, painted matte black and sporting a cut steel sign on the top that read, "Vertigo." She hopped out of the taxi, approaching the front door nervously, wondering if Nasir was on the other side of those tinted, reflective windows. She tugged on the handle of the door, and it didn't budge. Panic sneaked into her, permeated every limb. Questions flooded her, rendering her almost paralyzed. What the fuck is going on? She tried the door again. Stuck. Locked. Closed. She stepped back from the door to re-examine the windows, searching for some sign that this wasn't the right place. Maybe she'd gotten the address wrong. She dug her phone from her purse, fumbling with it to open the email from Nasir telling her where to go and at what time. Was she here on the wrong day? If Nasir was at the helm of this, he couldn't have made a mistake so large. Her heart pounded as she reread the address, then looked up to confirm it. The front door jiggled, and then it cracked open. A man poked his head out. "Are you Cassandra?" Relief blossomed inside her, and she nodded, finding her voice suddenly gone. "I was expecting you. Follow me." She stepped inside the restaurant cautiously, finding the inside mostly dark and quiet. If this was a restaurant, it was either shut down or some entirely new concept she'd missed in the lifestyle section. Maybe silence and dark confusion were the newest trends in the eating scene. She followed the man, finding the place modern if completely devoid of guests. Tables sprawled around the main dining room, not set for dinner, the room unlit, the hostess stand abandoned. "Step this way, please," he said, guiding her through a doorway and into what looked like the back area of the restaurant. Here, at least, she found signs of life, soft, gauzy lighting and the faint aroma of cooking. A table at the back, closest to some low-hanging lamps, stood against a wall made of lightly trickling water and some form of hydroponic plant system. Jagged ferns and spider plants jutted out from planters nestled into the waterfall. The man guided her to one of the 2 chairs at the table, and she sat down in wonder, trying to take it all in. Then she heard the music. It played softly, almost unnoticeable over the tumult of her thoughts, but it sounded familiar. She smiled as she thought, yes, she knew where she'd heard that tune. Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Precisely the song the band had played at the wedding where she'd met Nasir. Except this time, it was played by a string quartet, exactly as she joked it should be. "Thank you," she said to her guide as he pushed in her chair. He bowed slightly and hurried off. She shook her head, clucking her tongue in wonderment. This guy, this place, this whole fucking thing, it couldn't be real. But where is he? Her belly flopped with excitement as she looked around, taking in more details. The vases full of white roses, bowls bursting with cut lilies. As she craned her neck to look around, she spotted someone in the shadows. She straightened, gasping, as Nasir emerged. He came toward her, hands buried in his pockets, face more earnest and soulful than she'd ever seen it. She couldn't fight the grin that spread across her face. She crossed her arms over her chest, feigning displeasure, because it was the only reaction she had, the only thing she could do in the face of such thoughtfulness, such sweetness. A small grin crept over his face as he came over to her. Nasir looked more gorgeous than ever, like their 3 months apart had refined him into an ideal version of his own self. He wore a tailored navy suit, a gleaming black watch, and black leather shoes shined to perfection. She sighed a little as she looked him up and down, shaking her head. He'd probably had to throw this together last minute, since her dinner suggestion came so fast, and he must have worked like hell. "Hi, Cassandra." He got down on one knee, smoothing a hand over the top of her leg. "I wanted you to meet the lady I've chosen." She couldn't fight the grin now. "Well, here I am." Nasir smiled from ear to ear, so wide that it hurt. When Cassandra covered his hand with her own, it felt like a victory, like they didn't even need to say anything more. Even though there was a lot more to be said, a whole world of things to catch up on, discuss, and plan. But for now, he simply wanted to relish this sweet moment, the first time he beheld his family, Cassandra and the small bump that would be his son or daughter. Most men had time to prepare for a family, either planned it alongside a partner or had time to settle into the news. But for him, it was the opposite. He'd woken up with a start, like coming out of a nightmare, and realized his life had a head start. And he'd been asleep for far too long. "I love you." The words burst out of him. He hadn't meant to say it so soon, but it was the only damn thing in his head. Her eyes went shimmery, and she squeezed his hand. After a few moments, a teardrop hit the top of his hand. She sniffed, voice coming out shaky. "I love you too." His mouth parted, searching her face as the words cycled through him, sparks of disbelief in their wake. He swallowed a knot in his throat, moving his hand from her leg up to the swell of her belly. He cupped it reverently, struggling to find the right words. "You're pregnant." She nodded, eyes still shimmering. He squeezed his eyes shut, questions clouding his mind. "Why?" But nothing followed it. Of all the questions that jumped up and down inside him, begging to be acknowledged, "Is it mine? Can we be together? Why haven't you let me in?" The only thing that rose above the cacophony was the simple, grounding love for her, no matter any of the reasons, no matter the why. "My parents were miserable together," she said in a shaky voice, her hand smoothing over his on her belly. "They got married only because my mom got pregnant with me. By the time I was 14, they divorced. They hated each other so much, and they'd only ever been together because of me." She paused, her breath hitching. "I don't want to wear a mask for my children. I can't do that. I won't do it." "I would never ask you to." He saw the heartbreak in her eyes, the pain of past trauma. "And I would never force my child to live through that." She pursed her lips, nodding, her gaze falling to her belly. If she had any doubt that he would welcome the role of father, he'd erased it with that subtle admission. Maybe she hadn't even realized it. "Relationships are what we make them," he continued, voice softer, reaching to take her hands in his. "I don't have the best experience, and it seems neither do you, but we have each other, and we're in control of it. There may be a child, yes, but whatever we decide to do as a couple doesn't have to affect the love or stability we can offer them." She laughed a little, nodding. "Man, you know just what to say to win a girl over." He grinned. "And if you'll be with me, we don't have to stop at one. I'll give you all the kids you've ever wanted." She blinked out a few tears, her eyes widening. "Well, you've started out with a bang." Nasir lifted a brow. "What do you mean?" More tears spilled from her eyes as she beamed at him. "I'm pregnant with twins, Nasir." His mouth fell open, and then he whooped with laughter. He cupped her belly with both hands and planted a kiss there, looking up at her as if it might be a joke. "You're serious?" She nodded. "I saw the ultrasound earlier this week. They're in there. 2 of them." He laughed again, the knowledge settling into him like the long-lost missing piece of the puzzle. He grabbed her hands, pressing a kiss to each. "Wait until my brother Asim hears this," he said. "We're in first place again, Abiti." Cassandra laughed, and he grabbed her face in his hands and pressed a kiss to her lips, coaxing one kiss and then another from her salty, plump lips. When he broke for air, he swore, getting back on one knee. "I forgot something," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out the tiny ring box, the one he'd picked up from the jeweler only 2 days prior. "Cassandra, will you please be my wife, the mother of our twins, my partner, my friend, and anything else that you'd like to be or do in my life?" She held a hand over her mouth, her body shaking with soundless laughter, or maybe crying, or maybe both. She nodded, tears spilling out onto her cheeks, and then she threw her arms around his neck and wept into his shoulder. "Yes, Nasir," she choked out, "because it's the only thing I want to do." Epilogue. Cassandra groaned as Sophia zipped up the off-white wedding dress. It had been altered only that morning, but with just 2 weeks left until her due date, she was pretty sure her belly grew inches per hour at this point. Sometimes at night, in the quiet of Nasir's bedroom, she thought she could even hear it growing. Sophia's tongue poked out of her mouth as she struggled to clasp the top of the zipper. "Almost got it." Cassandra wheezed dramatically once it was fastened, then grinned over her shoulder at her soon-to-be mother-in-law. Her own mother, Catherine, beamed at her from the corner of the elegant bedroom where they'd all been getting ready, snapping a few pictures on her telephone. Out the window, she could see just the corner of the wedding site on the grounds of the villa, where chairs and an altar had been set up amid the sprawling green grass. The villa, rental in Northern California, couldn't have been cheap, but as both bride to Nasir and a late-term pregnant lady, she had double the reason not to give a damn. "You look so beautiful, my baby girl," Catherine cooed, pressing a kiss to her cheek. "I feel like a whale," Cassandra said, smoothing her hands over her huge, lacy belly. Well, dear, you're having twins, her mother reminded her. She'd chosen to wait until a bit later in the pregnancy to get married, mostly to coincide with the maternity leave she'd taken from her new agency, Cassandra's Coupling, the endeavor she'd started after resigning from her previous agency. She and Nasir both thought it was the best step, a graceful exit that allowed her to take an entrepreneurial route, with full creative control over her work. And though it started out small, her bursting list of happy client reviews meant that her business grew by the day. Laura had moved with her and would cover for her for the next few months. Sophia laughed throatily. It's a new Azhar tradition, didn't you know? All the brides must be incredibly pregnant prior to the marriage. My sons apparently won't have it any other way. She cast a sharp glance over at Elena, Asim's wife, who stood off to the side holding her 15-month-old daughter, Eleanor, in her hands. I'm all about starting new traditions, Elena quipped, which made Cassandra laugh and then tear up. This day was a perfect cocktail of emotions and hormones, one she barely knew how to process. If she wasn't bowled over by love, it was gratitude or adoration or relief or excitement. It wouldn't be long before she was a shivering mess on the altar, clinging to Nasir to help her stand. And it's my job to uphold them, she said, smiling over at her soon-to-be sister-in-law. She and Elena had headed off quickly, and though they'd only seen each other a few times throughout the months of her pregnancy, she felt more like a long-lost best friend than some distant relative. Nasir even admitted to her recently that he'd known they would hit it off, something he wore a bit like a badge of honor. Which means Basiri will no doubt be following in his elder brother's footsteps, Sophia mused, eyes narrowing at no one in particular. I'm sure we can count on it, Elena sighed. You'll get more grandkids out of the mix, that's for sure, Cassandra said, rubbing her belly. Maybe he'll get triplets. That would be the perfect conclusion, Elena said. Sophia laughed. Come, ladies, we must go down now. I just got the signal. Cassandra waited for her mother to lift her heavy silk-lined train, pressing at the white netting that covered half her face, pinned to a trendy small hat that sat low at the back of her head. Her blonde tresses were pinned and curled up beneath the hat in a vaguely 20s style, while her lipstick was bright red and shocking. She and her mother made their way slowly down the wide staircase, steps creaking under her weight. At the bottom of the stairs, she sighed, lifting the bottom of her belly, wondering when these two babes would make their way out into the world. Almost there, Catherine murmured as they neared the elegant French doors leading outside. Beyond the brick-laid patio, the intimate group of friends and family gathered, all of them standing by folding wooden chairs. In the distance, off to the side of the white podium, a 4-piece string quartet played. Catherine and Sophia departed for their seats together. Cassandra's father, who waited off to the side, approached her with tears in his eyes. My beautiful girl, he whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. He offered his arm and she took it, smiling up at him. Are you ready? As ready as I'll ever be. Once the mothers took their seats at the front of the gathering, it was time for Cassandra and her dad. They started a slow walk toward the altar, Nasir's back still facing them. As she neared the gathering, the quartet started a new song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Friends and family rose to their feet. Cassandra grinned, taking it all in, loving the dry lick of the late fall air, the familiar faces, which were turning now to face her. She spotted Laura, who already had tears on her cheeks, and Vida and Oscar, who beamed at her like she was an angel coming from the heavens. But the person who snagged her attention most of all was the tall, dark, handsome man next to the officiant. Nasir turned slowly and his eyes swept over her, sending chills through her even from so far away. A grin spread across his face, the most vibrant she'd ever seen, and immediately the tears came. She shook with laughter and tears as she made her way down the aisle toward Nasir, her father clutching tight to her arm, the wafting notes of cello and violin mingling inside her, lifting her to bliss. In front of Nasir and the officiant, her father kissed her forehead again, and then retreated to his seat off to the side. In the front row, Laura wiped at her eyes already, which prompted another wave of emotion in Cassandra. She turned to Nasir, laughing a little as she grabbed his hands and lined herself up to face him. His eyes watered, his grip warming, everything about this feeling precisely like the best path she could have ever chosen in life. "I love you," Nasir whispered, while the quartet finished their song. "I've loved you since I laid eyes on you." Cassandra wilted, feeling only seconds away from the inevitable shaking and clinging portion of the ceremony. In the months since they'd reconciled, it had been a non-stop upswing of love and attention, of getting to know each other, of plumbing the depths of emotion and communication, while testing the limits of honesty and expectations. There was no other man she wanted to do this with, and this could never be a sorry repeat of past mistakes. This was a confident step into the future, a future that she and Nasir created together, one that would be completely and entirely theirs. "I've loved you since you said the 80s band inspired divorce," Cassandra whispered, a bit more quietly. "So it looks like I've loved you just a little bit longer," he said, winking. Cassandra swallowed a knot of emotion, clutched his hands like she might blow away, even though that was impossible with the twins. "But I loved you harder," she grinned. "I loved you so much, I made you two babies." Nasir tossed his head back with laughter, and the officiant cleared his throat. Nasir straightened, squeezing her hands, but that smile didn't leave his face. The smile that bloomed like a secret crafted especially for her. A smile Cassandra would do anything to see for the rest of her life. This has been the Sheikh's Pregnant Fling, Azhar Sheikhs, Book 2. Written by Leslie North. Narrated by Roberto Scarlato. Copyright 2017 by Relay Publishing. Production copyright 2017 by Relay Publishing.